This video contains subject matter that may be offensive and disturbing to some people. If you are the type to require a warning throughout a video or show, let this message serve as your warning. This channel discusses the harsh reality of true crime. If this warning is not sufficient for you, consider a different genre and unsubscribe from my channel immediately.
What is going on, freaks? Doesn't look like anybody will be watching tonight either. For some reason. Must be shadow banned or something. I have no idea. It's the weirdest thing in the world. We got the air conditioning on, so might make some noise. Yep, well, we got one last night tonight, and then tomorrow is our big donation night. There you go. Hey, thanks, Scout Dude. Yeah, I was going to say, you guys should check out the, even though I had some audio difficulties today, but on my other computer over there, but you should check out the Jodi Arias. We're re-streaming the old trial. It's pretty interesting, but I have all these videos and so forth that I made a long time ago, so they're it makes it more interesting. I have a bunch of photographs from the trial as well, and some of them are pretty disturbing, but it is what it is. No, I'm never going to go over JonBenet Ramsey. It's like the most that case, the Arias case hasn't been covered for so long. I think there's people that haven't heard of it, and it's pretty interesting. But JonBenet Ramsey's like every single, it's just so boring. Yeah, what about it, Carol? Yeah. Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. I remember how much I was so upset with the prosecution's unethical shit that they were doing. Even though everything's just, the verdict and everything, but does the ends justify the means? I don't like that kind of stuff. It reminds me of this, similar to like some of the YouTubers that are out there. They just come over to your show, watch something. Oh, look what I found, everybody! Right when you're doing your show, those types. Is there anybody here? Man, you guys gotta start chatting more in the chat. It's becoming where I'm talking, and then 5 minutes later, I look down, and the same last comment is sitting there. Yeah. No, you're not, Paulette. Jesus. It's crazy. You're looking down there, and Kubi said, "It's been my favorite, thanks." And then I'm talking, and I look back, and that's the next comment. That's still there. Yep, hey, Aaron, what's going on? Yeah, I talked to Colleen for I don't know, seems like it was almost 2 hours. We were just bullshitting about, all kinds of stuff, But, we went over the cases again. She said we have enough for 2 more cases, so we're going to add 2 more soon. So we'll have 7, which is crazy, right? I mean, 7 cases in the... Let's see. Yeah, we're talking about the one in Southern Oregon. That seems to be making good progress there, already being worked on. When I say worked on, I mean in the final, the genealogy portion. So that's good. And that one's really just a clue for detectives. Cigarette butt that they were very interested in knowing who was smoking it, and that'll give them a name, and then they can ask questions. The flipper guy one, they are in the sequencing. It passed the first stage and it's all the way to the last. We have a hair sample that we're using in that one, and so that one's doing pretty well too. I think in the next couple weeks it'll... No, actually, it's already at... I thought it was already at bioinformatics, but they're... I don't remember. But apparently, like in May here, it should be something going on in that one. Yeah, that's the one I think is the most interesting of the ones that we're doing. The Altoona one. Lake Altoona Doe. A man that was shot, weighted down, and had flippers on. So you'd have to think to yourself that there's no way, unless if his hands are completely bound, then that means it's a homicide. If he weighted himself down intentionally with flippers and then shot himself to then sink with the weights, but it sounds like he was bound. So when you hear that, that means that the flippers, he was likely in the water doing something, or about to get in the water, because what would be the purpose for somebody shooting somebody ahead, wrapping him up with weights, and then throwing him in the water, and then putting flippers on too? I mean, that's stupid, right? It doesn't make any sense. So the person would have had to have been doing something utilizing flippers, or was about to, or had been using flippers, then they were killed, weighted down, and dumped. Okay, so that one's going to be interesting. Yeah. I think I saw Linda Molden Howe earlier from the Cattle Mutilations and Crop Circles. Thank you, Jim Lawn. Flip a skipper. And by the way, I went to the doctor today, and she said, by the way, the CNA or whatever it was just not really what you want. And then I think they're like a doctor. I know she wasn't a doctor. She was like a nurse practitioner, I think. And she came in and checked and said, well, your lungs sound absolutely clear. And I was telling her about how when I'm testing, I tested positive. Today it was lighter, though. It was wasn't quite as crimson as the other ones. And she goes, and quit testing yourself. Just like my dad said. Just like everybody says. She goes, some people test positive for months. And I was like, and it doesn't mean you're giving it to anybody. It just means your body processed it differently, and it makes it seem like, I don't know. What's weird, though, is when you go to Europe and you catch COVID back this last year, you couldn't come home until you tested negative. So what? Those people have to sit there for 4 months until it shows negative again? It seems like there's got to be protocol where, I know, listen, you're testing positive, but let's do something else to see if you're spreading it at all. Yeah. Anyways, that's where we're at there. What are you talking about? Yeah. Yeah, there's still a whole bunch that haven't been delivered. I can see it on the screen for the notebooks. You'd have to send, I don't know what your real name is, Mel's Diner, so you'd have to send me an email with it. I mean, that's the problem. You guys all have these, most of you have different names that aren't really you. Yeah, it seems like that. The one in the new strain is similar to other descriptions that people have. My neighbors just had it a couple weeks ago, too. I don't know if that's the one I had, but I don't know what that means, Mel's Diner. You can just go buy them at the store. It's okay. Oh, this is the oh man, I'm glad that didn't show up on the screen. It was the Jodi Arias file with all these. There's like shots that they showed at trial of her nude, you know, like taking these crazy pictures with Travis. You know, I was going to do one really quick from an old one that we did a long time ago. Because I made contact with the sheriff, or I think it was sheriff or investigator in this case, and they were interested in us helping identify the killer. Not just the victim was already known, so I thought I'd go over it again really quick. I don't think it'll take that long. Yeah. So over on this channel, we actually try to go out and make a difference, but it's not popular enough. So people would rather watch, you know, the sensationalism, talk about, what do you call it? Just mind-bogglingly boring drama shit all day long. You can go right now to a drama channel and they have 700 people on the guise of true crime. Oh, we're true crime. Yeah. No, you're not. Okay. You're nothing about it, but people are more interested in that stuff than what we do, you know. So right now it's just been it seems like it's a struggle to get YouTube to go, hey, there's a live stream going. Okay, so this is one that we did a while ago, but I'll just read it again because it's pretty interesting. Man bringing presents to children finds former wife nude and strangled. So you immediately think, man, he might have had something to do with that. A man found his former wife nude and strangled with an electrical cord Thursday morning, lying next to her Christmas tree while their 2 children cried in a bedroom, police said. Cheryl Springfield, 21, of 3370, that's that house right there. This is back in 1980. 3370, yeah. Whittier found about 6 a.m. by a man who was bringing Christmas gifts to his 10-month-old girl and 3-year-old boy. So that's the ex-husband, and he's bringing gifts for the 10-month-old and 3-month-old. The 3-year-old. The children were crying in a back bedroom when the man and his woman companion, who were not identified, immediately entered the house. Okay, so he had a woman with him. Entered the house, Police Lieutenant V.A. Harris said. The father went to check on the youngsters. When the man returned to the living room, he saw the nude body of his former wife next to the tree. Medical investigator R.O. Medford said the cord from an iron had been wrapped around the woman's throat and knotted. Detective R.L. Mullins said the woman apparently had been molested sexually. Police have no suspects in the case. Thank you, Melissa South. That was one article. Then next day it just said Cheryl Lynn Springfield, 21 of Fort Worth, formerly of Breckenridge, was found dead at her home in Fort Worth, 6:15 by her ex-husband. Homicide investigators of the Fort Worth Police Department are investigating. Initial examination of the body revealed she had been strangled, beaten, and possibly raped, according to Fort Worth police. In 2016, it's been nearly 4 decades since Cheryl Lynn Springfield was found beaten and strangled on Christmas Day 1980. Circumstances surrounding her death and unanswered questions have tormented the woman's sister, Jan Tunnell. I stood over her casket and I put my hand over hers, and her little fingers were wrinkled, and I promised her I will find out who did this. She vowed she'd never break that promise after her only sister was murdered. Springfield was just 21 years old when she was found dead inside a quaint home on Whittier Street in Fort Worth. She had her whole life ahead of her. The spunky, happy brunette had been working things out with her ex-husband, Scott. The two had planned to spend Christmas together with their young son, but instead her ex-husband, who was ruled out as a suspect, found her body. Springfield was naked and bloody next to the Christmas tree. Detectives say she was strangled with a cord and was still tightly wound around her neck. It was brutal, and I mean it takes a lot to look into someone's eyes and watch the light go out, said Webster. A neighbor on Whittier Street told detectives they saw Springfield speaking with someone outside the home in the early morning hours that Christmas Day. The witness, however, couldn't give a good description of the person. Fort Worth police were able to lift a partial fingerprint as well as DNA from the scene. All these years later, though, there's still been no match. So look at that. They were able to get DNA from the scene. And this is where I got the contact information down here originally. I think this was on the Facebook page. 21-year-old Cheryl was beautiful, young, and vibrant woman who had a flair for speaking her own mind if prompted. She was a new, proud mommy who was separated from her husband and living in his childhood home with his sister in Fort Worth, Texas. So that's probably who that was, the sister that was with him when she was murdered during Christmas of 1980. On Christmas Eve, Cheryl and her son went to her mother's house and spent a beautiful day with her family before her mom dropped them back off at that home that night. Cheryl's mother has since passed, but was very discreet about the pain of losing her baby girl. She did, although mention her regret at dropping Cheryl and her new baby off that night, as she felt she dropped her off to her murderer. That's irrational, but I understand it, right? Her sister Jan, who was sadly robbed out of the experience of going from the average childhood regrets over fights to a matured relationship, an unbreakable bond unique to sisters, will never forget that day. She decided then to take the burden from the mother and the responsibility for keeping Cheryl's story alive. Jan remains dedicated to finding who killed her only sibling, and 37 years later, she's still fighting the good fight. Cheryl was found by her ex-husband under the Christmas tree, beaten and strangled, and when he arrived at the home with gifts for their baby that morning. That's what he found when he got there. Scott Springfield was devastated at the sight of the beautiful wife naked and battered on the floor and their baby screaming alone in the bedroom. The police investigated the possibility of his involvement, but found without a doubt he was not involved. The main suspect in the murder, Barry Dean Kelly, is currently serving a life sentence in prison for a murder he committed with eerie similarities to Cheryl's murder. Besides the obvious, Cheryl had her whole life robbed from her. It has always been important for Jan to honor her sister's life by helping investigators to find out what happened to her sister. So, anyways, that's the... Let's see. Here's a picture. I could have colorized it, but I just opened it up. This is actually her, I think, in the coffin. That's a picture of her right there. Let's see. And there's a Facebook page out there called Justice for Cheryl Lynn Tunnel right there. So, anyways, that's one that I got a hold of them, and they seemed like they were interested. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what happens on that one. But I thought I'd just do a Well, yeah, she was sexually assaulted. That's why they have DNA from it. And they even said she was sexually assaulted. Okay. Well, here we go. This is this case at like 48 hours, or I'm not sure if it's 48 hours. It's, let's see, Dateline or whatever, one of those people. They're doing this case on, what's her name in this article? Now we'll just go through it. It's pretty crazy. Hey, thanks, CaliGal3. I thought the button was broken there for a few minutes. Thank you so much. CaliGal3. Yeah, so there is DNA in that last case, and I had already contacted them, and they seemed interested, and told Misty about it, and so I'm going to have them look at it again. I don't know, they're probably already gone forward some other way, who knows. But that was back in October of last year. Alright, so Sheriff Brian Hawthorne reports, this is back in February of this year. So Sheriff Brian Hawthorne reports that on January 7, 2023, at approximately 6:30 p.m., Chambers County Sheriff's Office 911 dispatch received a call from Baytown Houston Methodist Hospital in reference to the suspicious illness of an emergency room patient who was transported via ambulance from Beach City, Chambers County, Texas. Corporal Yeatman and Deputy Southwell arrived at the hospital and initiated an investigation due to inconsistencies in the information provided by the hospital staff. The deputies contacted Chambers County Sheriff's Office Criminal Investigations Detective Skylar Rocks for further investigation. I don't know, we didn't get to that part. I was going to go look it up after I just read that, but I just... I mean, I'm just on to the next case, you know. I mean, we could go look that one up, but that one is already solved, so I'm not sure what good that does, you know what I mean? Well, I've already gone over that one. You guys can go back in time and go look at it, you know. I was thinking I could stop the show for a minute and go look up the guy's name that was mentioned, but then I thought, well, geez, it's been solved. I think it's similar. What am I supposed to do now? Do I go back and do that one, or do I continue on with this one? That's what always happens when people aren't ready to just... It's just... What do you want me to do? I don't know who you are, Susan Bell, so I'll go with the other people. Never seen you in my life. Let's see. Let me just see. Let me see if I can find the answer in 2 seconds, okay? God, I don't even know what article it was in. I don't remember what article that was in. Maybe it was in the one this one. Yeah, I think it was. Okay, hold on. Yeah, I got it. God, I wish you guys would just let me do the show the way I want to do it, though. It'd be great. To me, it wasn't really a big deal. All right, let me go find it. Hold on. Now there's a garroted. Same thing, the cord wrapped around her neck. Jesus. Milva Teams might have been strangled with a strip of cloth torn from the bottom of a t-shirt she was wearing when her body was found in a North Fort Worth ravine in October 1987. But Teams' body was so decomposed that it was impossible to learn much else. Harvey was one of the last of 24 witnesses to testify for the prosecution. Okay. So her name was Milva Teams. The body found Saturday in a wooded area. 63-year-old woman reported missing. Homicide Sergeant Paul Kratt said investigators believe that the decomposed body is that of Miss Melva Teams of the 2000 block of Castleberry. That doesn't sound like a similar type of person or anything. The body was found about 4 p.m. Saturday in a ravine. There must be, maybe there's a way that the neck thing was tied. Team's pickup was found abandoned in a wooded area off East Lancaster Street. Investigators suspect foul play in the woman's disappearance, but have no suspects or leads in the case. Yeah. So that was, let me go to like this one. How about this one? You guys, you're like mosquitoes buzzing around my head half the time. Will be exhumed. Oh, so why is that? They buried her and then are exhuming her that quickly? Fort Worth police were preparing this morning to exhume the body of Melva Mickey Teams in order to take blood samples from the strangled woman, homicide Sergeant Paul Kratt said. Investigators want to take blood samples from the body of 63-year-old woman for use as evidence. Test provides blood fingerprint, so DNA basically. Kratt said the test would help determine whether what he described as a fluid connected with the investigation came from Teams. He declined to elaborate. So that's probably like semen or something like that. Anyways, is that good enough for you guys? Thanks. All right. I'm going to get back to this one. Thanks, brown-eyed girl. I hate my voice right now. It's driving me nuts. Yeah, I don't know. Go look it up yourself. All right, here we go. Sheriff Brian Hawthorne reports that on January 7th, 2023, at approximately 6:30 p.m., they probably didn't do it with DNA because they would know that that's the same killer if it was, because they just would have compared the CODIS markers, don't you think? Pretty obvious, right? Okay, cool. All right, here we go. They must have got him a different way. They would have already known that he was the killer, and the case would be closed.
Today. Looks awesome. Sparkles. Thank you. Heart.
Yeah, the case is already closed. I mean, the case would be closed already if they found DNA that linked him, because they would have compared it with the DNA in the other case. So I think that article, like the one that we were just reading, is from, hold on. Yeah, it's from 2018, before people were doing forensic genetic genealogy. So when they said that name, it's like, oh, wow, wow, wow. But I doubt it's that same person. I mean, it could be if there's no DNA in the first case. If there was DNA in the first case, then they've already would have compared it and closed that case. Does everybody agree with that? That case was from 1987. If they had DNA in that case, 88. So I doubt they even used DNA in that case because it was 1988. But hey, we got the answer. We got the answer. Come on, look it up. Jeez, help me out a little bit. And if it was DNA, probably after 2018, they determined, wow, that's not the same person, because this article was written way before. It looks kind of similar to the one I'm looking at right now, but it's this one. It's not the same thing. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, okay. So anyway, let's start over on this one, okay? I'm just waiting to see if there's any follow-up. I don't want to move on until everybody's got every bit of information. You got it? Everything good? All right, now I need to get some water. You know, it makes you wonder if they were looking at pictures or something. Where the reason they would exhume her again and say liquid, there was a liquid on her. I mean, they didn't clean her up or anything? They just left all the same clothing on and bury her, and they're going to pull her out to go test whatever liquid it was they saw on a picture? Pretty weird, right? I mean, that whole exhuming thing in that case is strange. But come on, Zozo, look up go get the DNA answer and let us know. Come on, Jesus. Why not? You're the one that wanted to go get it. Go look it up. Hey, Professor Pug. I don't know. They had trials information in there, okay? I didn't see the link part really dramatically, like what linked him to the crime. Man, you're so mean. You have me go on to this other case, and then you can't even just look up that one element. You guys are so mean! I'm going to start saying you guys are so mean. That's right. So mean. God. How do you get rid of this stupid crap coming down the back of your throat? Just keeps on going every second. All day. It's not fun. All right, I'm gonna go to this one. Sheriff Brian Hawthorne reports that on January 7th, 2023, at approximately 6:30 p.m., Chambers County Sheriff's Office 911 dispatch received a call from Baytown Houston Methodist Hospital in reference to the suspicious illness of an emergency room patient who was transported via ambulance from Beach City, Chambers County, Texas. Corporal Yeatman and Deputy Southwell arrived at the hospital and initiated an investigation due to inconsistencies in the information provided by the hospital staff. The deputies contacted Chambers County Sheriff's Office Criminal Investigations Detective Skylar Rocks for further investigation. During Detective Rocks' investigation, additional inconsistencies as well as other determining factors made the illness appear more suspicious in nature. Sadly, the patient, identified as Joseph Hartsfield of Beach City, died as a result of what the Sheriff's Office believes to be foul play. Through the use of search warrants and other investigative techniques, Detective Rocks believed there was enough probable cause to meet with District Attorney Cheryl Leak Henry. On Friday, February 3rd, District Attorney Cheryl Leak Henry convened a grand jury, resulting in a felony indictment of murder for Sarah Jean Hartsfield, 48, of Beach City, Texas, wife of Joseph Hartsfield. Judge Chap Kane of the 253rd District Court issued an arrest warrant and set bond at $5 million. This is an active case, and the only limited details can be released at this time. Or limited details can be released at this time. I appreciate the hard work of the deputies and detectives who followed their instincts and identified the suspicious circumstances surrounding Mr. Hartsfield's death that could have been labeled as death due to illness instead of murder, said Sheriff Hawthorne. So anyways, this lady right here, let's see. Well, the next article will have her name in it. God, now I gotta go find where it was supposed to be. Different folder. Okay, there it is. There she is right there. So prosecutor, Chambers County woman indicted after husband dies from suspicious illness, also killed past fiance. Okay, so now we're looking at somebody who's probably like a black widow of some sort. The 2018 fatal shooting investigation is now being reopened in light of new information, according to Minnesota prosecutors.
On 2 and all new here at 4, a Chambers County grand jury convened on the Sarah Hartsfield case today.
She's the woman who's accused of murder after her 5th husband died back in January. KPRC2's Bryce Newberry continues to follow this case from Anahawk.
The whole point of grand jury proceedings is that they are secret, so we were not even allowed to be on the floor of the courthouse where all of this unfolded. But our cameras were rolling as 2 key witnesses in this case were escorted by a DA's office investigator to and from the courthouse, including the oldest daughter of Sarah Hartsfield, as well as the Houston Methodist emergency room doctor who tended to her husband back in January. 46-year-old Joseph Hartsfield died in the hospital due to what the medical examiner ruled complications of toxic effects of insulin. This same grand jury that heard today's testimony indicted Sarah Hartsfield for Joseph's murder back in February, but at the time, according to court documents, the manner and means of his death were unknown. This is the latest update on the case.
Ms. Hartsfield has filed a motion to dismiss her attorney. And so we'll see what the judge does there. We're still investigating, and that's really all I can say about it at this time.
Sarah Hartsfield is also under investigation in Minnesota once again for the 2018 shooting death of her fiancé at the time, David Bragg. She was never charged in that because prosecutors ruled it self-defense. Sarah Hartsfield has maintained her innocence and in messages to me from her jail cell said it's time for her to stop being vilified by Joseph Hartsfield family and the public. She said if she's guilty of anything, it's picking horrible husbands. This afternoon, Sarah Hartsfield remains behind bars.
Horrible husbands. What a. I'd like to say the B word out loud. But a woman who was recently indicted following the sudden and suspicious death of her Beach City husband was previously under investigation for the shooting death of her fiancé in Minnesota. Sarah Jean Hartsfield was indicted in Chambers County last week for murder after her husband, 46-year-old Joseph Hartsfield, died days after he was rushed to the hospital with suspicious illness in January. KPRC2 confirmed on Wednesday that Hartsfield, who had a previous last name of Donahue, fatally shot her fiancé in 2018 in Douglas County, Minnesota. The Douglas County attorney ruled in early 2019 that shooting was in self-defense, and she was never charged. Wow. But in light of new evidence, the Douglas County attorney told KPRC2 that the case is now being reopened. Our investigation, it's very similar to the Alex Cox, right? Yeah, these other things led them back to Alex Cox. Our investigation is considered active again, they reopened Charles Vallow again. Our investigation is considered active again because we are following up on new information that the Sheriff's Office received yesterday. Deputies were called to a Baytown hospital on January 7th in regard to Joseph. Staff members said he wasn't responding to the treatments the way doctors expected. According to sources, he was diabetic and his sugar levels were dangerously low. Doctors had no way to bring him back, and his death is believed to be an insulin overdose although nothing else has been ruled out. The medical examiner's office hasn't released an official cause of death. Detectives said they found several inconsistencies along with other factors which made the illness appear suspicious in nature. He died several days later as a result of what the sheriff's office said investigators believed to be foul play. Oh, there goes my stomach. Investigators learned Joseph's wife, Sarah, has lived at least excuse me, trying to look at something over here. Has lived in at least 39 different places. I was looking at that. I was looking at her been verified, and I was just, what? There was like 20 so different addresses. That's not really that common, you know. Now they're saying 39 though, throughout her adult life, and had been married 5 times. When we started talking to other husbands, and then finding out some of them maybe aren't alive anymore, and other issues, everything just started to point to foul play. Detectives interviewed at least 3 of the living exes, he said. Every relationship that appears that she's been in, everybody wants out of it because they fear for their life, Hawthorne said. A number of them have either made the statement, "I need out because I felt like my life was in danger," and some have found where their life was clearly in danger. The evidence in Joseph's death, along with information about the woman's past, was presented to an emergency Chambers County grand jury. They returned an indictment against her on Friday, and she was arrested at the home where the couple lived in Beach City. So anyways, you guys, we are, this is the final day until tomorrow, our final donation night of the month. And, if you'd like to help support the Grant Hughes Investigates channel, that'd be awesome. I actually donate over 50% of the net revenue to various true crime related charities, including our DNA fund, and that's what we were talking about a few moments ago. We have a DNA fund that we have 5, let's see. So far, we have paid for the solving of 4 cases. We have the Daniel Armentrout, the one in, the Peak 6, I call it, in Breckenridge area. Then we also have the serial killer victim. We just don't get to know her name because the family doesn't want her name out there. So that's one that we paid for. And there's another one that the victim was a victim of, some gang killing thing. So I don't really want anybody, hey, you solved this one. It's not really one of those. So those are 4 of them. Then we've got 5 in the books and 2 more that we're going to be funding here. So the only way to be able to do that is if you guys continually support the channel on a nightly basis. All right. So if you can afford it, that'd be freaking awesome. So let's see. The case of Minnesota, David Bragg. A letter from Douglas County Attorney explained that on May 9th, 2018, deputies were dispatched to the residence shared by David Bragg and Sarah, whose last name was then Donahue. Did you guys hear what I said at all? I mean, none of you went, wow, that's so cool that we've done all those. It's just hi. Deputies arrived to find Bragg's dead body on the floor of the home. According to the county's attorney, the couple was involved in a physical altercation before Sarah opened fire on Bragg. He reportedly discharged his gun at her, and she shot him back, ultimately killing him. It is clear from the incident that Sarah Donahue caused Mr. Bragg's death. The remaining question is whether his shooting was justifiable under these facts, the county attorney wrote. Investigators who examined the scene say that the analysis matched the woman's testimony of self-defense and that witnesses also provided statements consistent with what she had told them. In January 2019, the county attorney said she was justified in shooting Bragg in a matter of self-defense and that criminal charges against her would be declined. But the Bragg family has also had questions about what happened. The family representative shared a statement with KPRC2. Yeah, I take Mucinex. Let's see. Hartsfield remains in the Chambers County Jail with a $5 million bond. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next. So those are February 5th, February 8th, and February 10th. NBC News. Woman charged with killing her husband in Texas was involved in 2008 shooting death of former partner. I wonder if I can read those. Is that possible? My office has now received the entirety. I can't read this up here though. Processed the scene and conducted a limited trajectory analysis of a bullet hole in location consistent with Mr. Bragg discharging his firearm at Mrs. Donahue as she was ascending the stairs. DNA and latent print analysis of the involved firearms are consistent with Miss Donahue's version of events. Statements obtained by witnesses are in relevant part also consistent with Miss Donahue's statement. Alcohol and controlled substances do not appear to have played a role in the incident. It's clear from the evidence that Sarah Donahue caused Mr. Bragg's death. The remaining question is whether the shooting was justified. So I can't really read half of that, so I'm not going to do it. Hey, thanks, Miss Angels, for the PayPal. Yeah, I'm going to skip forward to some of the more recent ones. One in March 14th there. She killed her partner and was cleared. Now she's charged in her spouse's death. In December, Sarah Hartsfield told a friend that her husband and marriage had become a nightmare and that she had a plan to get out, according to private Facebook messages the friend provided to NBC News. Weeks later, the husband was dead. Hartsfield, a former Army sergeant, was charged with first-degree murder, and authorities in Minnesota had decided to re-examine the death of a former partner, who they had previously said Hartsfield killed in self-defense. In December 19th message, Hartsfield, 48, called her husband Joseph Hartsfield, 46, an empty person, and derided his financial irresponsibility. I have paid for everything to the point I have nothing left, she said. He was just looking for a meal ticket and way back to a lifestyle he could never attain on his own, she wrote in a message, which NBC confirmed came from the account that belonged to Hartsfield. Hartsfield, who did not detail any specific plans to her friend and neighbor, wrote, "It's now a matter of implementing, executing." The friend, who asked not to be identified for fear of being publicly linked to Hartsfield, said she thought her friend's message meant she wanted out of her marriage and to get on with her life, not that she was planning to kill him. Sarah Hartsfield has pleaded not guilty. 5 years before she was accused in her husband's death, Hartsfield fatally shot another partner. Authorities in Minnesota determined that the that she fired in self-defense and that the killing was justified. But days after her February 3rd indictment in the killing of Joseph Hartsfield, authorities said they have reopened the investigation. Chambers County, Texas Sheriff Brian Hawthorne alluded to other episodes in Hartsfield's past, telling NBC affiliate KPRC of Houston that she had been married 5 times in relationships that often ended under grim circumstances. Everybody wants out of it because they fear for their life. Her ex-husband, Titus Knorchild, I guess, was among them. He told NBC News that he was afraid of her while they were married and after their divorce. I'm very surprised I got out of the marriage alive, he said. Joseph Hartsfield was scared for his life, and he told family members about it, according to Hawthorne. Let's see, suspicious illness. When Joseph Hartsfield was hospitalized on January 7th with what authorities described as a suspicious illness, he was already brain dead, according to search warrant. He was pronounced dead 11 days later. Sarah Hartsfield is being held on lieu of $4.5 million. Joseph Hartsfield was diabetic, and before he was hospitalized, his blood sugar levels had dropped precipitously, a search warrant affidavit shows. Sarah Hartsfield told investigators that she went to get him juice and jam, and that when she returned to their bedroom, he'd vomited on himself, according to the affidavit. Hawthorne said that by the time Joseph Hartsfield arrived at the house, Methodist Hospital in Baytown, he was unconscious and in dire straits. Let's see. According to the affidavit, a nurse believed there may have been foul play because he was failing to respond to the glucose that medical staff members were pumping into his body. The amount should have been enough to last for hours, the affidavit says. In Joseph's case, his blood sugar kept crashing. Okay, yeah, because doesn't the diabetic insulin reduce your blood sugar levels? So probably if you get pumped full of shitload of insulin, and no matter how much sugar you take, your blood levels keep dropping. Perhaps, right? It says this could be a sign of too much insulin in the system. The document says, adding that 8 to 10 insulin pens were found on the side of the couple's bed at their home. In the weeks after Joseph Hartsfield's death, Sarah Hartsfield posted on Facebook that she felt numb and lost without him, and that she listened to old phone messages just to hear his voice. I guess I'm going to try to sleep. I can't possibly cry and weep anymore than I have this evening, she wrote on January 27th. I love you, Joseph Hartsfield. Right. 2 days later, she wrote, as I sit here trying to think of something to be grateful for in the midst of where I am, I'm so glad Joe and I said the things that were said to each other so there'd be no regrets. We didn't have cross words, no raised voices, no cold shoulder or silent treatment. I bet every single thing that she's saying is the exact opposite. So here's how I would read this. As I sit here trying to think of something to be grateful for, I can't find a damn thing. I am happy as hell that Joe has been killed. And there's a ton. I have no regrets though. We had so many cross words for each other. We yelled at each other all the time, and I often would give him the silent treatment. We were being ourselves, united. We were being ourselves, completely hating each other, and we sure as hell weren't going to figure it out together. So I killed him. There you go. Thanks, Tina Susser. I'm glad my speech worked so well to help support for the channel. It's awesome. Yeah, great. We heard every time. Yeah, we heard it. Yeah, exactly, because I need to do that. You know, if it doesn't happen. Yeah. Let's see, what's the next one? The 22nd. Thank you, Traveling Teresa.
Ocean wave, ocean wave.
Black Widow in Texas, see that? After 5-time bride is charged with husband's murder, other deaths get fresh look. So other deaths, huh? What are the other deaths there? Wow, thanks, Billy Juliana. The mayor. Plus, it's good to see you back in there.
Ocean wave, ocean wave, ocean wave.
Well, let me click on this one here. What are these other ones? For David George and Sarah Hartsfield, the first 8 months of 2018 were marked by death and destruction. His longtime partner died. She fatally shot her fiancé. His home burned. Well, how did his longtime partner die? That's interesting, don't you think? Thanks, Jim Lawn. And Scouting Dude. I'm trying to figure out a way to get my 3D model onto that other computer so we can just look at it more simply in the Arius one. But I'm kind of struggling with it. I'll try to figure it out. So let's see. By the summer of 2019, George, 59, and Hartsfield, 48, were married, and she had been cleared in her former fiancé's slaying. George was Hartsfield's fourth husband. It wasn't until months after the death of her fifth husband in Texas earlier this year that officials in Minnesota reopened their investigation into the fire and... Oh, what the hell? We gotta go back up here now. Hold on. What the hell happened?
Wave, 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 wave.
For David George and Sarah Hartsfield, the first 8 months of 2018 were marked by death and destruction. His longtime partner died. She fatally shot her fiancé. His home burned. Okay. So by the summer of 2019, George, 59, and Hartsfield, so David George, this is her fourth husband, were married, and she had been cleared in her former fiancé's slaying. George was Hartsfield's fourth husband. It wasn't until months after the death of her fifth husband in Texas earlier this year that officials in Minnesota reopened their investigation into the fire and death of George's partner. Oh, okay, yeah, so George's partner, there you go. That's the one, the other death. In February, Hartsfield was indicted on murder charge in the death of her husband. She's being held in lieu of $4.5 million bail. The investigation in Eagle Bend, Minnesota, northwest of Minneapolis, are active again. Well, what's this thing here? After Sarah Hartsfield was indicted on the charge of first-degree murder in the death of her husband in Texas this year, authorities in Minnesota said they would re-examine another death, her 2018 fatal shooting of a former fiancé. After the indictment, the district attorney's office in Chambers County, Texas, said investigators were seeking information about her previous names. Hartsfield had been married 4 times before, and the sheriff whose office investigated the case made an ominous claim about the earlier relationship. Well, what's that? In December Sarah Hartsfield told a friend that her husband and marriage had become a nightmare. And did I already do this one? Yeah, I already did that one. Huh, so now they're looking at her fourth husband's partner who died. That's a little strange, don't you think? What was that case we talked about? Yeah, the one, remember the one a couple nights ago? On the Oregon coast? She'd been married 8 times. After Sarah Hartsfield was indicted on a charge of first-degree murder in the death of her husband in Texas this year, authorities in Minnesota said it would be re-examined. After the indictment, the district attorney's office in Chambers County, Texas, said investigators were seeking information about her previous names. So I'm just going to go skip right now forward to a Daily Mail article. Ada, by the way, let me know about the case. It's going to be on like Dateline or something like that. I'm very surprised I got out of the marriage alive. First husband of 5-time married Texas woman accused of poisoning her latest spouse with insulin says she's a bad penny who threatened him during their divorce. The second husband of the 5 times married woman, now accused of poisoning her latest spouse with insulin, says he's very surprised he made it out of their marriage alive. Sarah Hartsfield has been indicted on first-degree murder charges for allegedly killing her diabetic husband Joseph by giving him too much insulin. It was her 5th marriage, and she is also being investigated in the death of her 4th husband's ex-wife, and a fire at his home. Jesus. I bet you anything she did all those. In 2018, she shot her then fiancé David Bragg dead, claiming self-defense. I'm very surprised I got out of the marriage alive, Titus Knorchild told NBC News in an interview this week after his indictment on murder charges. He was worried she would kill him for a $200,000 life insurance policy. The pair were married between 1993 and 1996 after falling in love as high school sweethearts. After their divorce, he said she would randomly pop up and even call his new wife. Jesus, psycho. She was like a bad penny. Every time you turn around, she'd be there. Sounds like Jodi Arias, actually. That's what she would do. I mean, I don't know if you guys heard, but like in that case, Jodi Arias at one time snuck through, like Travis wasn't even home. She snuck through the doggy door. And when he came home, like, she hid behind the Christmas tree. I mean, who does shit like that? I mean, that's just psycho. After their divorce, he said she would randomly pop up and even call his new wife. She was like a bad penny. Every time you turn around, she'd be there. She doesn't do it to confront you. She does it to remind you that she's there. That's husband number 1, right? That's the one that was shot. Hartsfield married 4 more times after their 1996 divorce and was also briefly engaged at one stage to Bragg. Her other 3 husbands, Michael Traxler, Christopher Donahue, and David George, are still alive, but she was involved in domestic disputes during their marriage to all 3. In 2018, she fatally shot Bragg in their home. She claimed it was an act of self-defense. In light of her most recent husband's death, police are now reinvestigating that case. A year after Bragg's death, she was married to George. A year earlier, his long-term partner, Becky Coons, died mysteriously. They must have reason to think she might be part of it. Like they already knew each other somehow. Now that fire and Coombs's death are also being re-examined. George has also claimed in an interview with Dateline that Hartsfield wanted him to kill the new wife of one of her previous husbands. Jesus. She denied the claim from jail. None of the subsequent husbands have spoken yet publicly at length about their marriages to Sarah. Sarah was arrested in February and is being held on a $5 million bond. It's not her first time behind bars. She was arrested on March 11, 1996, for assaulting her second husband, Michael Traxler, at their home located on Rio Bonito. At the time, Hartsfield was going by a different last name. She remained in jail for about a week until the charges were dropped for an undisclosed reason. Meanwhile, her then husband was given a citation. It appeared Hartsfield had only been with her second husband for only a few months before her arrest. Prosecutors have described... Ah, man, my mouth's so dry. Prosecutors have described their relationship as being short-lived. That's no more? Okay. Anyway, that sounds like a pretty interesting one. You might want to check on other things. I mean, this lady is almost like a serial killer. I mean, really. Who the hell knows who she may have killed at various times? And she was a military person? You know what I mean? Like, anybody that crossed her could be dead somewhere. I would actually look at anybody that she ever knew that's dead. It's crazy. Oh, hey, thanks, WNC Granny and Kelly. Thank you very much. I gotta put these in the spin over here. Anyways, what do you guys think about that? Does it remind you of any other cases? Or... She definitely seems like a black widow. What do you think the odds are that she's... Yeah, I saw TTJO showed up today on the Arias case. I couldn't believe it. It was a miracle. Yeah, you think Lori Vallow? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, sort of. I mean, I wouldn't count her as a black widow. She was just getting rid of... like, we don't know what happened to Joseph Ryan. But they were doing it for... Well, it could be similar, because maybe this lady here is doing it for financial gain, getting life insurance policies, right? Yeah, so these are the homes that they lived in here. This is Sarah Jean Donahue. She lives in this house not too long ago. It looks like a pretty nice one. Almost looks like a cemetery. And then Joseph Hartsfield. The one that I think it was just killed. I think they were living just right here. There's no street view here. It's like a private neighborhood there. But that's where I think the current the individual that was poisoned, or not poisoned, but given too much insulin, lived right here. Huh. Weird. Well, I don't really have much more to add to it, but I think I'll try to get more information, find out. Now I'm interested to find out more about where she was before. I want to look at the incidents in those other states too, see if there's anything out there on it. Huh? What does that mean? Donate or sue. What does that mean? Anybody know what that means? How much you want to bet that's a troll right there? If I go to their account, I'll open it up and I'll hit the about, and it says April 27th, 2023. And goodbye. What a stupid troll. You know what's one of the most funny things in here is when the trolls show up, they can't even type a sentence that makes sense. It's scary. Donate or sue. What? Sue? I know, it's weird because they're just so stupid. I mean, that's the thing. They don't realize how just dumb they are. Donate or sue. Huh? Okay, yeah, I'm good. Who are you talking to? Like, you're the one typing, right? Donate or sue. Yeah. Wow. It's such terrible everything about it. Makes no sense. It made sense to me, great. Yay. So, we got to get that troll fund going now, right? Make sure that they get punished for... Alright. I'm just going to move on to this next one here. This is old. Might be reading in it, but I got to try to get through it. I've got the COVID brain fog shit going on. It's crazy. When I was driving home, just leaving the doctor's office, I just wasn't even thinking about anything. And I drove right past all the places I'm supposed to turn. You know, just driving. And then I looked up and I go, where am I? What am I doing? Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Donate or sue. God, what a... Ah. So here's a story that's kind of weird because this story is on my... Yeah. What's even weirder is they insult, but they're so dumb about doing it. You know, they make this account and they're trying to get really sleuthy with it. And it's not even a good zinger, you know? It's just... Thank you, brown-eyed girl. 714. So this actually happened on my birthday. I mean, like, this first article anyways. It's so strange. Like, this is the actual day I was born. So this happened in 1965 here. And this woman right here, missing bride, Mrs. Mary Little. And she's very pretty too. I don't know if you can see it there, but like you know. That's her. Missing bride's bloody car found abandoned at Lenox. An attractive young bride. Let's see where this is in Atlanta. Looks like we're near. Let's see. An attractive young bride of 6 weeks vanished mysteriously, and her bloodstained automobile containing clothing was found Friday in a parking lot of the Lenox Square Shopping Center. Let me see if that's still there. No? George is over here though, so is that it right there? Shops around Lenox Square. That's probably it. Lenox Square Shopping Center. Yeah, right there. Oh, wait. What do you mean no sound? You don't have sound? You gotta refresh or something, Karen. Everybody else has sound. Yeah, it's in Atlanta. I just said that. Hold on, let me see what Chloe's doing over here. Thanks, Jim Lawn. Man, getting killed over here. Don't know where my camera is. No idea. I'll do this one. Oh, I am on there. I just have to be below the camera, like here. All right. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, instead of suing. That's always better, isn't it? Alright. So here we go. Let's get back to this. An attractive, young... Yeah. Again, attractive, right? An attractive... Yes. I mean, normally, if it was ugly, they'd say... An ugly young bride of 6 weeks vanished mysteriously yesterday, and because she's ugly, we will not be searching for her. Let us know if an attractive bride goes missing. We'll be on that immediately. Yeah. An attractive young bride of 6 weeks vanished mysteriously, and her blood-stained automobile containing clothing was found Friday in a parking lot at the Lenox Square Shopping Center. Thank you, Cindy J. Police identified the missing woman as Mrs. Mary Shotwell. Yep. Mary Shotwell Little, 25. We get the address here. 1609 Line Circle. In Decatur, so there it is. I don't know how far away it's from there, so not really far. Looks like maybe she lived in an apartment at the time. Secretary to the personnel manager at the, excuse me, jeez, man. Personnel manager at the Mitchell Street branch of the Citizens and Southern National Bank. It looks very, very bad at this point, commented Detective Superintendent Clinton Chafin. Mrs. Little was last seen at 8 p.m. Thursday on the mall at Lenox Square, so she was there. She had met Miss Isla Stock, a co-worker at the shopping center, and the two visited a supermarket and other stores. When the two parted, each to her own car, Miss Stock said Miss Little appeared in a hurry to get home and, geez, sorry guys, my nose is just messed up, and placed the meats which she had purchased in the refrigerator. Police said they had verified that Mrs. Little drove in front of the supermarket at 6:10 p.m. Thursday and picked up $20 worth of groceries she had purchased earlier. Okay. 5 minutes later, she met Miss Stock at a restaurant for dinner. Officers related, and it says the two went on to other stores. Detective Harry McAllister and MC Faulkner said Miss Stock told them Miss Little appeared to be in excellent spirits and was feeling well. When Mrs. Little failed to report for work Friday and telephone calls to her home were unanswered, a routine missing person report was filed on her. The investigation took serious turn when her 1965 model blue Comet was found at noon in the parking area on the Lenox Road side of the shopping center. All right, let's see. Which one? Where's Lennox Road? Ferry. No, there is Lennox Road, so over here. Okay, so it's more over on that side. Probably not there, that's on a roof. Hey, you like this story, Mark? Is it, are you following along pretty well? Let's see, let me go to page 12. Says it was continued. Oh, there it is right there. Okay. And right, let's see. And so, gosh, do I have to go back to 1 again to see what that said? Officer said the front seat and right front window of the car were heavily blood smeared. Wow. Heavily blood smeared, and grass stems were found plastered to the seat by blood. You know what it's almost like? She was abducted from there, taken somewhere, killed, and then the car put back in the same mall. I mean, that seems kind of obvious, really. I mean, how would blood be in there, but she's not there, right? A brassiere was found in the front floorboard together with a silk stocking. A blood-stained black and white slip and white panties were found stuffed. See the detail they have back on these? It's pretty crazy, right? A brassiere was found in the front floorboard together with a silk stocking. A blood-stained black and white slip and white panties were found stuffed down between the front seats and the two-door car. Hey, Ray Deathray, is anything ever actually interesting, or just joke after joke? You know, that's what I noticed. You never really comment on cases. It's always looking for the next joke. All right, let's see what the next one is. Officers said they found a partially empty package of cigarettes and a bronze nameplate, Mary Shotwell, on the dashboard. I wonder if those are her cigarettes. In the back seat were 5 brown paper sacks filled with assorted groceries, a shoebox containing a new pair of shoes, a pasteboard box containing a cake, and a picture lying upside down on the floorboard. So let's see. In the back seat were 5 brown paper sacks filled with assorted groceries. All right, so she already picked up her groceries. A shoebox containing a new pair of shoes, and a pasteboard box containing a cake and a mixture lying upside down in the floorboard. Officers said they found no purse or other personal effects in the car. A traffic officer said he checked the shopping center at 6 a.m. and at that time the only car there was an old model blue Rambler. Let's see, motor cold. The auto's motor was cold, indicating it had been parked there for several hours before being discovered. Mrs. Little's husband, Roy Little Jr., a state bank examiner, was out of town Thursday on a business trip, but returned Friday. Mrs. Little was described as 5 feet 6, 120 pounds, had green eyes and brown hair. When last seen, she was wearing a green print dress. The FBI was cooperating in the case, on the possibility that kidnapping could be involved. Let's see. Chafin pressed the entire homicide squad and most metropolitan officers into the search. The car was brought to headquarters where it was searched for fingerprints. Results of the search were not announced. The blood-stained clothing was turned over to the state crime laboratory for study. The disappearance occurred in an area that had been plagued this year by a masked intruder who had broken into a dozen apartments and attacked women's occupants. The intruder attacked one 27-year-old woman at 3 a.m. Thursday and attempted to force entry into the apartment another shortly before midnight. Police emphasize, however, there was nothing to connect the apartment break-ins. I wonder if that's sort of like the Golden State Killer. So, the day after my birthday back then. So let's see. An anxious young Winston-Salem woman waited last night for word from Atlanta, Georgia, where an all-out search was underway for Mrs. Mary Shotwell Little. Miss Craven Williams of 51 Faculty Apartments and Mrs. Shotwell were roommates for 2.5 years at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, where they both graduated in 1962. In June that year, after graduation, Mrs. Little, then Mary Shotwell, was maid of honor in Mrs. Williams' wedding at Marshville. Only last month, on September 4th, Mrs. Williams was bridesmaid in Mrs. Little's wedding at Charlotte. The two girls became fast friends and in their freshman year at Greensboro and decided to become roommates the next year. She was fairly quiet, Mrs. Williams said last night, but she was still one of the finest persons you would ever know. Miss Williams has not seen Mrs. Little since the wedding last month, but she received a letter from her last week. She said being married was wonderful, and she just couldn't wait for us to get down to Atlanta to see her, Williams said. Miss Judy Shotwell, a senior at Wake Forest College, is a sister of Mrs. Little. So, word awaiting, so they're just kind of freaking out, waiting on friends, and nobody has a clue. Blood in auto is of same type as missing brides. Well, yeah, because that's from her, that's why. No, I think she did leave the mall. It's obvious, right? Because if she didn't leave the mall, she would be in the car, right? I think she was in her car, and when she got her groceries into the car, somebody abducted her and took her somewhere, and then later drove the car back to get to their car again. Yeah, so the person abducted her using her car and killed her in there. What's weird is the driver, though, must have blood all over him if there's blood on the seat there. I mean, I guess it's also possible that she was in the car and then was killed while in the car and then moved to another vehicle, but that would be right in front of all these people. It seems like more like she was forced, somebody was forced to drive away, either her or she got in and drove away and held her at gunpoint or whatever, you know. Yeah, that's what I said, yeah. Let's see. A state crime laboratory report has confirmed that bloodstains found in missing Atlanta woman's automobile are her blood type. The report issued Tuesday said the stains found in the car belonged to Mrs. Mary Shotwell Little, A 25-year-old bride of 6 weeks, missing since Thursday night. Are the women's blood type? The report issued Thursday said the stains are her blood type. Police said no trace of the missing woman, native of Greensboro, North Carolina, and a graduate of University of North Carolina at Greensboro, has been found despite an intensive investigation. We're doing everything humanly possible to find her, Detective Captain Clinton Chafin said. Mrs. Little, a bank secretary, had dinner and went shopping with a co-worker Thursday before the woman separated to go to their homes. That was the last time Miss Little was seen. The woman's husband, Roy Little Jr., a state bank examiner, was out of town on business when she disappeared, police said. All right, then 3 days later in the paper. Let's see. Big mystery and big fears have come to Big Atlanta. Is Pretty Mary Shotwell, Mrs. Roy. Okay, now, Death Ray, you got your jokes. They pinged her phone and it came back to her house on the wall in the kitchen. What are you talking about, Jeff? There's no pinging back in 1965. But come on, you guys. I'm not sure what's going on lately on this channel, but it's just it's been really tough. I'm putting in way more hours, and it's not really, it's like I always say, man. It's got to be, every night. I spent a lot of hours getting this stuff together, and yes, it's a monetized channel. I got to have it be worth my time to do all this, and I think I do a lot of good too, don't you think? I mean, we actually make a huge difference. So on when we're doing these shows, you just think of me like you're going to Starbucks or something, and you go, hey, that guy spent an entire day making me a coffee. Well, of course, you wouldn't tip that person. You'd probably never go back to the Starbucks again. But this is a different thing. Okay, this is where you guys help support the channel, so it allows me to keep doing what I'm doing. And what I don't like doing is having to always say it all the time, because people seem to just not really think about it like that. But this is something that we've been doing on the channel for a long time, and it's, it is what it is. All right, anyways, Atlanta, big mystery and big fears have come to Big Atlanta. Is Pretty Mary Shotwell, Mrs. Roy Little, dead or alive? Where? Will the sexually twisted cat burglar who has terrorized 13 women since March 16th strike again tonight? Does the cat burglar know what happened to the happy 25-year-old bride of 6 weeks who disappeared at 8 p.m. on October 14th? These are the big fear questions that have frozen the lives of Charlotte. Let's see. I don't know, Jeff. You type in stuff like that when you're not joking. But nice try, though. Nice try. Man, what's funny about that, though? They pinged her phone and it came back to her house on the wall in the kitchen. Then next comment is a smiley face. Then the next one is joke. And then he gets, oh, you're so funny. Oh, you're hilarious, man. You're the funniest person I've ever heard in my life. What's funny about that? Give me the part that's funny, like the actually aesthetically pleasing humor in that. There is none. Yeah. Let's see. These are the big fear questions that have frozen the lives of Charlotte's Mr. and Mrs. Nathan Shotwell and daughter Judy, and that of their brand new son-in-law, into an agony of timeless wedding. Well, he's not a son-in-law because they're not married, right? They are the questions haunting the armies of apartment living office girls. Let's see. For the first time in memory, veteran police reporters, Homicide Squad Lieutenant J.H. Barnes no longer wears an easy smile. His squad has handled 82 murder investigations this year, and it has made 82 arrests for murder. It is not accustomed to being stopped by mystery. We aren't stopped, Barnes said. We'll keep digging. I think I'm just gonna. I don't like that the way that guy writes. It's kind of a. Okay, then there's one 12 years later. See, some of these have these. They look back and it's like the whole story. So I'm gonna go with that. And I think I might have to go back. This might be. Let's see. Mary Shotwell Little. Okay, so this is just this piece right here. The disappearance of Nancy Carroll Campbell in Cobb County last week stirred memories of another missing woman among law enforcement officers in the metropolitan Atlanta area. 12 years ago, also in October, an attractive, brown-haired, green-eyed, another attractive, young bride of only 6 weeks vanished after here's the thing. If they make an article that says 12 years ago, in October, a brown-haired, green-eyed young bride of only 6 weeks vanished, people would go, she must be ugly. Because they always say that she's attractive. Like if you had just left that part out, right? Or do the people writing these articles think when you read 12 years ago, also in October, a brown-haired, green-eyed young bride of only 6 weeks vanished after shopping. Does the writer think, man, there's probably people at home wondering if she's ugly or pretty. Let's go ahead and put in, so I guarantee it, there are people like that, right? So anyways, 12 years ago, also in October, an attractive, brown-haired, green-eyed young bride of only 6 weeks vanished after shopping with a friend at Lenox Square Shopping Center, leaving only her blood-stained car in the shopping center parking lot as evidence. She was 25-year-old Mary Shotwell Little, who disappeared October 14, 1965. Police still do not know what happened to her. Reports on the whereabouts of Mrs. Little are still occasionally called into police or the newspapers. During the year immediately following her disappearance, thousands of calls and tips were received, all of which were painstakingly checked. Some of the more dramatic tips in the Little case included the sighting of a Lilburn minister 15 days after Mrs. Little's disappearance of a young woman wandering along a highway near Hashton, 25 miles northeast. Another lead in the case came when Humble Oil Company credit card ticket signed Mrs. Roy H. Little Jr. turned up about a month after. So a sign turned up about a month after she disappeared. Police have put a hold on Miss Little's credit card. So somebody used her credit card. Another lead in the case came when Humble Oil Company credit card ticket signed Mrs. Roy H. Little. So somebody was using her car. They probably robbed her and assaulted her. Well, I mean, it's hard to know, but why would somebody be stabbing her? It's crazy. Or shooting her, or however she died. We don't really know. Cards and a credit manager found a carbon copy of a gasoline invoice dated October 15th, the day after she vanished. The purchase was made in Charlotte, North Carolina, and another invoice purchase using that credit card was made the same day in Raleigh, North Carolina. In both cases, attendants remembered seeing a man and a woman in a car, but could not positively identify the woman as Mrs. Little. Well, it's because it wasn't her, right? I mean, yeah. Well, it could have been. Well, it could have been her and then the car brought back, I guess. But. Nor were handwriting analysis conclusive. Experts said the invoice were blurred from so much handling. The Mary Shotwell Little case stirred the imagination of many people. Miss Little seemed to have no reason to disappear voluntarily. She had told a friend who was with her at Lenox Square on the day of her disappearance that she had to hurry home to clean the apartment for weekend company. Miss Little, who worked for an Atlanta bank, picked up her groceries at a Lenox Square store and then vanished. Police found her 1965 Comet with groceries in the back seat and her panties and slip stuffed between the bucket seats of the car. Blood smeared on the seats and window of her car matched Miss Little's blood type. Police in Georgia, Florida, and North Carolina spent thousands of man-hours investigating every case that seemed to be tied to her disappearance. Even some 200 Army reservists assisted in a search. In an ironic follow-up, nearly 2 years after Miss Little's disappearance, the woman who took over the job Miss Little had held had moved in with Miss Little's former roommate, was found murdered and stuffed into a trunk of her own car at an East Point. Wow, what? What the hell is that? An ironic follow-up. Nearly 2 years after Mrs. Little's disappearance, the woman who took over the job Miss Little had took over the job Miss Little had held and moved in with Miss Little's former roommate. God, they might want to start looking at that roommate. What's going on with that roommate? Prime dissector, the predictor. I'm a certified human ID detector. Gonna get ya on a stretcher. You try to play me like an old protector. Thank you, brown-eyed girl. That's very kind of you. Very kind. Well, thank you. Thanks for thinking of me. Now, I'm kind of stuck on this part now. That can't be ironic. An ironic follow-up. It's not. That's nothing. Either. Does anybody? I mean, doesn't that seem more likely related than not? An ironic follow-up nearly 2 years after Miss Little's disappearance. The woman who took over the same job that she had had, moved in with the same roommate that she had had, and then was found murdered and stuffed into the trunk of her own car at the East Point laundromat. Police said the woman, Diane Marie Shields, received a bouquet of roses shortly before she was killed, and that Miss Little received a bouquet of 5 roses from an unknown source before she disappeared. Okay. Then it's not ironic. Give me a break here. Hold on. Let's... I just took a turn here. I gotta go... When the hell did this happen? Diane Marie Shields. Yeah, see, 1967. And that's her? That looks almost identical. Seriously? Miss Shields' murder isn't close to solution. At 5:05 p.m. on May 19th, an attractive young office secretary, also attractive, right, got into her automobile in a parking lot near Washington and Hunter Street Southwest and drove west on Hunter Street. A few hours later, see, this is exactly the same. It's the same story. A few hours later, the body of Diane Marie Shields was found stuffed into the trunk of her automobile in East Point in one of the most brutal and baffling murder mysteries ever discovered in the metropolitan area. After 3 weeks of intensive investigation, East Point and Atlanta police admit they still have not come up with a motive for the bizarre slaying, nor are they close to unmasking a suspect. Miss Shields, that's not her, Mel's Diner. That's what I'm telling you. This lady right here isn't the one I just showed you. They look almost identical, is what I'm telling you. Okay. I think this is the lady that took her spot. So this lady here was, this is Mary Shotwell Little. She was the one that's never been found. I think this person is Miss Shields. Yeah. Miss Shields, receptionist secretary for the Associated Industries of Georgia, was believed to have been en route home when she left the parking lot. She usually followed that route to an apartment at 19... Oh, I gotta put that in there. So she lived at 1934. Wait, is that going to be the same one, right? I mean, it should be anyways. West Virginia Avenue. Although I thought they were, the way they just described that is in that other article is that they were roommates. I don't know, I'm confused. She usually followed that route to an apartment. Maybe that's a boyfriend or something. West Virginia Avenue, College Park, which she shared with a sister, Mrs. Sandra Fleming. East Point Detective Captain L.M. Banks and Atlanta Detective M.C. Faulkner said Miss Shields was always careful to drive with the right front door. Oh, maybe she doesn't live in the exact same apartment, but it's the same lady. So the roommate is the same, but it's not the same apartment. Okay, let me... And those are apartments. So she got the same job and has the same roommate. Man, there's something going on here. Yeah. That roommate... Virginia, College Park, which she shared with the sister, Mrs. Sandra Fleming. East Point Detective Captain L.M. Banks and Atlanta Detective M.C. Faulkner said Miss Shields was always careful to drive with the right front door locked to prevent anyone from getting into the car when she stopped in traffic. The right front door on the 1963 Chevrolet Sports Impala gunmetal blue was locked when East Point police on routine patrol saw the car parked at 2:30 a.m. on May 20th near a coin-operated laundry in East Point. They saw blood dripping from the trunk. An investigation revealed the body wedged into the trunk in a narrow space between the spare tire and an assortment of cooking utensils. The body was fully clothed except for the shoes, which were found in the rear floorboard. The death was described as very brutal. Officers said she had been strangled with a rope or wire. They said a medical examination indicated 5 times the necessary force to produce death had been exerted on the throat. A kerchief, which she wore around her head, had been rammed down her throat, officers related. They said they were told this had been done with enough force to cause death, but the actual cause was listed as strangulation. Man, this is crazy, right? She had been struck. She had been struck I think it must say, want to say, with a blow under her right eye. And there were marks of another blow. I think that's where we go here. Wait, from the trunk. Does it keep reading? The way they have this written is weird. I don't know if it goes up here. Or another blow under her right ear. A cut was found on the back of her head, but investigators said it could have been caused by a fall. There was no evidence of an assault, officers said. Her pocketbook was found intact beside the body. That ruled out robbery as a motive. The time of death has not been fixed, officers related. They said the time was first fixed at around 1 a.m., but now a theory has been advanced that she might have died as early as 8 p.m. the preceding night. Simulated tests are being conducted to determine the rate of decline in body temperature when the body is contained in a trunk of a car. It is hoped that this will narrow down the time range. They've asked an individual named Jim Smith to lie in the trunk for hours upon hours, even until death, so that we can figure out what time this lady might have died. I was just checking to see if anybody was listening. Miss Shields was wearing hose that were dirt-stained, indicating she had walked without shoes on a dusty floor, officers said. There were small scratches on her legs that have not been explained. That wasn't really in the article, everybody. For those that are just listening, it doesn't say that they put another guy in the trunk. Officers do not believe... Well, if you were listening, you would have laughed, Cindy. Officers do not believe Miss Shields was killed in her car, but as yet they have not come up with a likely spot. She had a normal number of friends, led a normal life, and was well liked both in business and socially. That much investigators have ascertained in questioning persons. But there did not. Let's see. Does it? I don't. This is so weird how they have this written here, with these lines and shit. I never made it even to this part. This is a drawing prepared by Atlanta Constitution cartoonist for investigating searches for clues for slaying of Diane Marie Shields. Drawing shows new hairstyle worn by Miss Shields when she was murdered in East Point. Police are seeking information from anyone who may have seen Miss Shields the night of May 19th. What is this one? Nothing sinister about roses sent to victim, police report. There was nothing sinister about a surprise gift of 5 roses Diane Marie Shields received several months after the disappearance of Mary Shotwell Little in October of 1965. East Point Detective Captain Melvin Banks said Sunday it had been learned the roses were sent by the parents of a 5-year-old boy with whom Miss Shields had babysat. She had refused their offer of payment, she added, and the roses were a token of appreciation. Okay, so that should have been left out of that article, that part there. So this is crazy because this article is so much... This is May, so this must happen in May then. May 1967. Let's check and see if this has ever been solved. No. Can you believe that? That one's still not solved. So that's why you got to think that they might be related, because both aren't solved. So I guess this is somebody who's had podcasts about this. And that's the Mary Shotwell Little case. I'm looking at Diane Marie Shields. Looks like they combine them together. See that? Mary Shotwell Little and Diane Shields Mountain Murders. I'd never even heard of it. I just randomly found the name on the Charlie Project in the 60s folder. That's funny. This is from 1988. So let's see if they put any extra in here. Mary Shotwell Little told her friend, "I'll see you tomorrow," and walked away into a crisp autumn night. For Miss Little, married only 6 weeks. Oh, I thought they were just engaged or something. Never came. The next day, October 15th, 1965, her car, a gray 1965 Comet, was found in the parking lot of Lenox Square Mall. The unremarkable spoils of a routine shopping trip lay in the back seat: 5 sacks of groceries, a bakery cake, and a new pair of shoes. But in the front were ominous signs of violence: blood smears on the passenger seat, on the neatly folded slip pushed between the front seats. Police also found Mrs. Little's underpants, girdle, bra, and one blood-stained stocking in the car. What they didn't find was 25-year-old Mary Little, a brown-haired, green-eyed newlywed from Charlotte, North Carolina, who worked as secretary to the personnel manager of the C&S Bank on Mitchell Street. The Atlanta police and the FBI mounted an intensive investigation to find Miss Little. We used more resources on that case at the particular time than we ever had on any other case up until the cases of the missing children, said Fulton County Police Chief Clinton Chafin, who investigated Mrs. Little's disappearance while working for Atlanta Police Bureau. 23 years later, the case of Missing Bride, as it came to be known, is among the oldest unsolved missing person cases still on the Atlanta police books. The most highly publicized recent case is that of 27-year-old Julie Love, whose July 11th disappearance is just as baffling. Atlanta police say Miss Love, who taught creative movement to preschoolers, left a career planning meeting at 9:30 a.m. that night and has not been seen since. Friends found her 1983 Mustang with an empty gas tank parked on a residential street in Buckhead, apparently abandoned. Friends and family members say Miss Love would never have disappeared on her own, and they have offered a $10,000 reward for information on her whereabouts. "We have nothing new, zero on that case," said Detective Glenn Martin. In 1987, Atlanta police investigated 2,663 missing person reports. Many of those cases, Detective Martin said, involved juveniles. Those are cases that clear up on their own just due to information. National statistics on missing person cases are hard to pin down and depend mostly on the reporting habits of local police. So let me go to this. It says 4D. This is okay. So 2 more pages. There it is. Are they going over this case though? Let's see. Remember, every nuance of Little's case, even 23 years later. It was October 14th, 1965, a Thursday night. She was last seen at 8:05 p.m., said Captain Perry, now with the Henry County Sheriff's Department. "I guess it is one of the most baffling cases I've ever had. Earlier in the evening, Mrs. Little met a co-worker, something stock for dinner, Isla stock for dinner at Lenox Square cafeteria. Miss Little was wearing a long-sleeve olive green print dress that had been part of her wedding trousseau, and she carried a white London fog raincoat. The two ate, split up to go shopping, but met again in the shopping center at 8 p.m. Miss Stock told police Miss Little said she needed to go home and clean her apartment because she was expecting company. But where was her husband at this time? You know, like if they just got married, I mean. She apparently never made it home. The next morning, Mrs. Little's boss, Eugene M. Rackley, was surprised when his secretary was late for work. Because Mrs. Little's husband, a state bank examiner, was out of town, there he was, that's right, he was out of town. It was Mr. Rackley who reported Mrs. Little missing. He never drove to Lenox Square in an unsuccessful search. He even drove to Lenox Square in an unsuccessful search for his secretary's gray Comet. The disappearance of Mary Shotwell Little continues to haunt those who search for her. Yeah, I don't understand either, Cindy. I don't know. I think people are just interested in other shit, you know? I really don't understand. It's like nobody's typing. I'm not even sure there's 200 people watching. I actually think those numbers are bogus, to be honest with you. We probably got 10. Yeah, why wouldn't he, Cindy? That's his boss, yeah. Dealing with the unanswered questions surrounding her son's disappearance. Oh, wait, I lost the spot that I was at. Hold on. We're right here. The only real lead police had, he said, was that a month after she vanished, police discovered that her gasoline credit card had been used on October 15th at gas stations in Charlotte and Raleigh, North Carolina, and the little slips were signed in what appeared to be Miss Little's handwriting. But the license tag noted on the charge slip turned out to have been stolen, and police were never able to trace the car any further. There were times I thought we were so close, Captain Perry said with a sigh. I bet if they had that car today, they could solve it. Because there'd probably be DNA from the killer in there. No, it doesn't make him suspect at all. I had just explained that the credit card was being used up out of town there. As the case dragged on, the search for Mary Little became the stuff of urban folk tales. There was ransom demand, later determined to be a hoax, and fake note written on CNS deposit slip saying, "Help! Mary Little being held captive." That was found to be a prank committed by a DeKalb County teenager. Crank telephone calls to Mrs. Little's apartment nearly drove family members to distraction. Cryptic messages from Mary were scrawled on public bathroom mirrors, and psychics advised police to drag the lake at Stone Mountain. And there were confessions. We had one guy come in 3 different times, a guy in overalls who said he knew Mary. Captain Perry said, "I finally had to get him committed just to get him out of my hair." But almost from the beginning, Captain Perry said he had a theory about what happened to Mrs. Little. I think she was abducted by a pervert. Yeah, that's what I think. Just right from the parking lot. Today, theories and a slim file containing an old poster and some yellow newspaper clippings are all Captain Perry retains from the Little case. Roy Little, Mrs. Little's husband, has since remarried. Mrs. Little's mother, Mrs. Nathan Shotwell, was widowed recently, but she still lives in Charlotte, North Carolina, even after all these years, she said. Well, that's kind of weird. So, where the mother lives is where one of the cards was used, right? Yeah. The Atlanta police said the Little case file was moved to a basement years ago and is now apparently lost, of course. Right. Yeah, they always get lost. Fulton County Police Chief Chafin's biggest regret about the Mary Shotwell Little case is that the police were never able to give her family any answers. They were such nice people, he said. It was so important to us. We thought it would help if we could tell them so they could know what happened to their daughter. Like the police, Eugene Rackley, Mrs. Little's boss, has always been convinced that Mary Little met with foul play. She was a fine, fine person, he said. She would never have voluntarily dropped out of contact with her family, he said. I guarantee you there was no way she could do her family that way. Mrs. Little was an excellent secretary and was well liked at the bank, Mr. Rackley said. There was a terrible time for us. I remember when this happened, my daughter was only 2 years old. I kept thinking about Mr. Shotwell, Mary's father, and how it would feel to have that happen. At least when you have a child who has died or who has been killed, you could adjust to not know. You could adjust, but to not know, it's worse than death. Right, that's what I always tell you guys, the same thing. Because you can't adjust as quickly. Why would they look at his company? To this, I don't really get it. She was at the shopping mall and was abducted from the shopping mall, and her credit card was used up in North Carolina. I'm sure they looked at everything. You know how many cases there are out there where the old files get lost in water damage? It's crazy. Yeah, but we have Saturday night shows all the time here, you know. But it is getting kind of warmer out, so people are probably doing something else. To this day, Mr. Rackley said, every time I talk to my 25-year-old daughter, if she's going out of town, I say, lock your car. Remember Mary. So, there's that. I think I might have one more here from... Let's see what this one. This one's from 2004 in the Atlantic Constitution. So this one actually has pictures. So look right there. That's the inside of the car. You can see that's probably blood, that discoloration there on the seats. Yeah, well, the same job part is something that I think is pretty crazy. It almost feels like, they had the same roommate, though, too. Like, let me ask you that. Don't you think that's weird? Like, she got the same job, this other victim, and it's still not solved. And so, and then this lady, the other victim, which we had, where is this thing here? It's, her name is, Diane Marie Shields. I guess she got the same job that she replaced Mary Shotwell, right? Okay, well that's a good, that makes sense then. I thought you were talking about because he said he went to visit the parking lot. But the roommate's the one that seems kind of weird to me. I mean, you got the same roommate too that moved to a different place. So I guess both those angles are pretty decent. If you want to go with something about where she worked or something to do with the roommate. Because what are the odds of both of those things? That another person 2 years later gets murdered while she was in her vehicle. and happened to be taking the same job that Mary Little had, the exact same position, and randomly was living with the exact same roommate that Mrs. Little had. That's can't be coincidental. Could it? I mean, that's too much. Anyways, let's see what this one says. This one might be longer. So I might need some reading fees to get to this one. We're kind of slow tonight, so if we could get to the reading, this is going to be just reading. So maybe if I throw myself in prison for a little bit and see what we can get. Oh, I don't know. We might be able to think about what it might be related to, but I'm sure other people have talked about the same one. So if we get out of prison, let's see if we can get to this last one. Looks like it's a pretty long one. Continues on to another page. Got some pictures. I have a feeling I'm going to be in here for 10 minutes straight, and then we'll just call it a night. Well, I think this would easily be solved today with the technology. Yeah, or sue me. Yeah, you either send in a super chat or sue me. And bail me the hell out of here. I think what it is, we have too many new people that aren't part of what we've always been doing, It's strange. I'll just put a timer on it. And by the way, the links are in the description if we don't make it to this part. I can barely talk anyways. Oh, well, there's WNC Granny got me out of here. She's already sent in the super chat, the PayPal earlier. Thanks, WNC Granny. Yeah, it's weird how it's always the same people. Like these other people just sit and watch all the time and never help out like that. All right, well, thank you, WNC Granny. We'll get out on just that because you're so generous. Storing your findings in a big data tool set. Don't know what that means, Andrew. But hey, thanks, Tony Enginoir.
Storing your findings in a big data fuel set.
Thank you, Andrew, but I'm good with names. I am?
I'll be back if you want me to.
I don't know, they're trying to pretend that they've got a database of crimes and they're putting everything in there. Thanks, Michelle Sikora Griggs. I haven't seen you in a long time. I remember I used to like saying that one. I don't know what Andrew's talking about, but thanks, EI Rule. All right,
made it. A little late. Yellow heart.
let's go through this thing then. I think it's cool they have this picture in here, though. Maybe there's more. Fresh undies. Thanks, Jim Lawn. I could use a pair of those after crapping my pants earlier. Thanks, man. Very kind of you.
fresh undies.
Yeah, somebody sent me an email saying, "Is this the next Chris Watts?" Come on, guys. We don't do Chris Watts over here, okay? Yeah, thanks, Oddball. Thanks for letting us know there. What's Splunk? What are you talking about? A systematic method will solve the crimes. Yep. Sure. All right, here we go. We're on Whatever Happened to Mary Little. When Jim Ponder retired from the FBI after 3 decades as an agent, he took home a piece of unfinished business, file number 79159. That's the only case I worked on that we never solved, he says, laying a brown folder. He must have found that file that we were talking about. He says, laying a brown folder on a coffee table in his DeKalb County home. I copied this because I figured something would come up and I'd be called. Yeah, sorry to hear that, Oddball. But yeah, I wasn't asking for reasons why people. Yeah. It's a long time. Yeah.
A systematic method will solve the crimes. Splunk.
Yeah. Can we get on to this story right here? All right, thanks. The newlywed disappearance shocked Atlanteans in 1965. Her fate is a mystery to this day. When Jim Ponder retired from the FBI after 3 decades as an agent, he took home a piece of unfinished business, file number 79159. That's the only case I worked on that we never solved, he says, laying a brown folder on a coffee table in his DeKalb County home. I copied this because I figured something would come up and I'd be called. The call never came. The disappearance of Mary Shotwell Little, the most famous missing person case in Atlanta history, seems as baffling today as it did when Ponder saw her blood-smeared car on a warm autumn afternoon in 1965. He opens the folder and Little's face stares out from a black and white snapshot stapled to the inside. The bouffant hairdo and penciled eye brows belong to another time, leafing through the yellowed reports held by rusted paper clips. He pauses when he comes to a form the young woman filled out in a neat cursive script. It's an application to volunteer at the Red Cross. She enjoyed working with children. I have personal interest in this case, Ponder says. Let's see. I have personal interest in this case, Ponder says. I got to know Mary's family. We never gave them an answer, and that bothers me. It still does. Now 83, Ponder is one of the last law enforcement officers living who worked on the Little's disappearance for a dwindling band of detectives. It is the mystery of a lifetime, the case they couldn't crack. The clues are so fragmentary and contradictory, the investigators can agree can't agree on what happened. Some think it was a random sex crime. Others believe she knew her abductor. Yeah, it's possible. Maybe that's why somebody got into the car or something like that. While witnesses could still come forward and remains could still be found and identified, solving the puzzles get more difficult with each passing year. All local police files on the case have been inexplicably vanished. All police files on the case. That's weird. God, see. This is big. This is a big one. This is huge here. And then it goes on to the next page. Right. No physical evidence survives, marking a DNA conviction highly unlikely. The only remaining record of the investigation is the FBI's, and it's incomplete. Thanks, Jane from the country. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution examined hundreds of pages of those files through a Freedom of Information request and interviewed nearly 200 people involved in various aspects of the case. Those documents and candid recollections do not answer the riddle, but they do reveal an exhaustive and frustrating search that was mostly hidden from public view. It is the untold story of a trauma that deeply affected Atlanta as it was on the verge of becoming a big city with big city fears. News reports suggested police were looking for a stray predator. Behind the scenes, however, cops hounded Little's former roommates. There you go. They turned her husband's life inside out. They delved into a sex scandal at the bank where she worked. They even thought a rose killer might be sending women flowers as he stalked them. So here comes that other part. Oh God, how did this become so interesting all of a sudden? It's crazy. In 1967, the trail took a gruesome turn as a woman who had worked in Little's office, had lived with Little's friends, was found beaten and strangled in East Point. Now I wonder how much of the rest of that was serious, was real. So now I wonder if that one article had accurate information. So in this article it says something different. It says, it took a gruesome turn as a woman who had worked in Little's office, so maybe she did take the same position now, and lived with Little's friends, was found beaten and strangled in East Point. Police at first thought the cases were linked. Some of them still do. I do. But what looked like a break faded into a footnote mystery of its own. Little was 25 and had been married only 6 weeks when she vanished into the darkness outside Lenox Square on the evening of October 14, 1965. The fate of the missing bride quickly became an obsession, leading Atlanta newscasts and front pages and prompting massive searches. Let's see, where are we at here? As soon as I scrolled it up, I lost it. Atlanta newscasts in front. Massive searches. Atlanta wouldn't see its like again until the child murders of the early 1980s. In an era where the ghostly faces of the missing routinely appear on bulk mail and milk cartons, it might seem a bit strange that one woman's disappearance could stir such an overwhelming response. But Atlanta was a much smaller town in 1965. The metro area had less than a third of today's population. There was no major league sports team, no completed perimeter, no international flights, at an airport that boosters were proud to say was the nation's fourth busiest. Atlanta was just beginning to outgrow its britches, says writer Paul Hempfield, who covered the Little case as a journal columnist. When something like this happened, it was almost like a warning shot. You wondered, my God, is this the price we're going to pay for being a big city? Look how, this is the longest article you ever hear. Only later would it seem ironic that the Journal of October 14th contained an editorial decrying the rising number of sex crimes in Atlanta. One of the many young people who flocked to the city from around the South during the early 60s was Mary Shotwell. Hey! Thank you, Teresa Marie. Nobody has to do a late fee, but if you want to call it that or whatever, go ahead. There isn't late fees here. I hear that a lot, though. Late fee! And thank you for thinking of sending in late fees, even though there's no need. But if you want to call it something else, like helping the Grant Hughes Investigates channel fee, awesome. I know, I'm just kidding. Let's see. Only later would it seem ironic. Okay, one of the many young people who flocked to the city from around the South during the early 60s was Mary Shotwell. She came from a middle-class family in Charlotte, where she was known as an outgoing, fun-loving student, the kind of girl who volunteered to wear papier-mâché horse head as her high school mascot, Millie Mustang, or paper-mâché, there it is. It spelled it. I guess maybe that's how you spell it. But paper-mâché horse head as her high school mascot, Millie Mustang. She went on to study secretarial science and at what became the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. I guess I always thought it was paper-mâché, but it's like probably was like papier-mâché, right? Something like that, where we just said it that way. She went on to study secretarial science, right? It's like sanitation engineering. At what became the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. She wanted to relocate to New York after graduation, but her parents felt it might be unsafe, so she settled on Atlanta instead. Shotwell moved into a triplex near Emory University with some college friends and found a job downtown with Citizens and Southern, the bank that was financing much of Atlanta construction boom. Colleagues considered her reliable, hardworking, fastidious in dress and manner. Like many young women of her time, the slender secretary with the neat brown hair and hazel eyes wanted nothing so much as to get married and start family. Let's see. In 1964, she met Roy Little, a 24-year-old Citadel graduate who had recently finished active duty as an Army lieutenant. They attended a Georgia Tech-Alabama football game and went on to date for 10 months. Married over Labor Day weekend in 1965, they moved into Belvedere Apartments in South Decatur. During the second week of October, Roy was in LaGrange training to be an auditor with the state banking department. Mary was lonesome and arranged to meet a friend from the bank at Lenox Square after work that Thursday. That's that woman she was with. Compared with the mega mall of today, Lenox then was an almost quaint open-air shopping center with stone sculptures of Uncle Remus, characters in the plaza. Let's see, does it go up higher than that? Okay. That's her vehicle right there. That car is probably worth $50,000, $100,000 now, that kind of car. Uncle Remus, characters in the plaza. Little met her friend Isla Stack at the S&S cafeteria on the Lenox roadside and chatted happily about married life. After dinner, they shopped for an hour and a half. They parted around 8, Little striding into the parking lot with a cheery, "I'll see you tomorrow." When the punctual secretary didn't show up Friday morning, coworkers phoned her apartment. No answer. They called her landlady and learned that Little had not retrieved her morning newspaper. So she never made it home. I wonder if she stopped anywhere on the way home, like a gas station or something that nobody remembered. The bank notified Lennox security to be on the lookout for the car, a 1965 Silver Mercury Comet. A few minutes past noon, a guard spotted it in the yellow parking area. He noticed blood on the bucket seats and called police. Jim Ponder, the FBI liaison with local law enforcement, was at Atlanta Police Headquarters downtown when a wrecker hauled in the car. Jop, as his friend called him, after his initials, was a South Carolinian who had served in the Navy during World War II and been wounded in the D-Day invasion. Oh man, that guy's probably a badass. He had been a special agent since 1947, matching wits with Klansmen, Soviet spies, and mob bosses. Given the possibility of an interstate kidnapping, he unofficially joined the investigation and sent a teletype to Washington reporting what was known. He was puzzled from the start. There were a lot of things about this case. I wonder if they, where her car was found, was that consistent with where her friend knew that she parked the car? I don't think it was. He was puzzled from the start. There were a lot of things about this case that never made sense, he says. The car was full of them. 2 members of the Atlanta Police Department, and this is in the Atlanta Constitution. Hold on a second. Links in the description, and this is by Jim Achmudi, Gurdon Dyer, and Pat Coaster back in 2004, 18 years ago. It's weird nowadays when I hear 2008, I go, oh yeah, a couple years ago. But 2008 now is 15 years ago, Time is just going by way too fast. Anybody else get that same feeling? Alright, so we're down here. 2 members of the Atlanta Police Department identification unit inspected the vehicle. Did we make it down here? Oh yeah, right here. There were a lot of things about the case that never made sense, he says. The car was full of them. 2 members of the Atlanta Police Department identification unit inspected the vehicle. They found a fine coat of red dust on the exterior, as if the Comet had been on a dirt road. They also found blood in several places: on the driver's door near the handle, on the inside window of the passenger side, smeared over the vinyl of the front seats. A few grass clippings were stuck in dried blood. See, it feels like she was taken out somewhere, probably assaulted in maybe a grassy area, killed, left there. Then the killer got back in the car with the grass on himself, and that got stuck in there. Where the passenger's head would have rested. Let's see. So it says a few grass clippings were stuck in dried blood where the passenger's head would have rested. Oh, that's weird. That's weird. So there was blood on the passenger seat headrest, I guess, with grass stuck in it. So maybe that was her, and the seat was laid back, maybe. So now it's a little more confusing. Carefully rolled together and placed between the seats was a set of women's undergarments. Girdle, slip, panties, speckled with tiny drops of crimson. I guess it's also possible. I think it's not very likely because she was really happy. But let's say there was somebody that she was like, oh, and the whole story about having to go home to put the groceries in the refrigerator or clean up wasn't real, but she was late to meet somebody. Probably not very likely, but Gotta throw that in there. Speckled with tiny drops of crimson on the floorboard lay a black brassiere and a section of stockings that had been cut neatly as if by a knife. Tests indicated the blood was probably Little's. The undergarments were definitely hers and had been worn recently. There was something about the scene that didn't add up. The crime technicians thought. Bill Moore of the identification unit wondered if the smearing hadn't been a ploy. Smearing hadn't been a ploy to exaggerate the amount of blood. That's bullshit. Larry, however, of the state crime lab seemed to agree, telling Moore that despite the gory display, there was no more blood than you'd get from a nosebleed. Yeah, but maybe you're sliding around on it. I don't, if it's intentional or not. Maybe, though. The odd assortment of clues led some investigators to speculate that the scene had been staged to confuse police. A few cops suspected Little of doing the staging. Oh, really? Jesus. The car was littered with dozens of other items, including Coke bottles and a package of Kent cigarettes, Little's brand, and 4 sacks of groceries she had bought that evening at the Colonial store that anchored the southern end of Lenox. Other items were missing: her car keys, her John Romaine handbag, her, let's see. Where was that? Handbag. Her flats. Where does it go next? Her what? You would think it would go up here. Her John Romaine handbag. Her flats. White London fog raincoat and olive green sheath dress printed with white flowers. There was no shortage of fingerprints. One would tantalize investigators for years: an unidentified partial print smudged in blood on the steering wheel. In the days ahead, thousands of people enlisted in the largest search Atlanta had ever seen. Pilots scanned the area looking for signs of a body. Military reservists scoured the woods around Lenox. Even jail inmates were pressed into the hunt. Reward posters offering 1,000 and then 3,000 went up around the state. The city's top-ranked radio station, WSB Quincy in Dixie, asked residents within a 20-mile radius of Lenox to check their property for personal items missing from Little's car. A corner of police headquarters soon resembled a thrift shop with piles of clothing, purses, and other items of female apparel. Ponder spent days exploring the woods and side roads along I-85, a relatively new 4-lane, then known as the Northeast Expressway. We searched old abandoned wells and everything you could think of, he says. None of the efforts paid off. In fact, publicity became something of a burden as police had to check out all leads, well-intentioned and otherwise. A tipster claimed Little's killer was trying to flee on a bus bound for Chicago, and authorities had pulled over in Cobb County. It was a hoax. A wedding ring that resembled Little's was found beside the Chattahoochee River. It wasn't hers. A dollar bill surfaced with the scribbled words, "Help, I'm being held prisoner in a Chinese cookie factory. Mary Shotwell Little." It was a bad joke. Little's parents, Margaret and Nathan Shotwell, came from Charlotte to keep vigil with their son-in-law in the couple's apartment in Decatur. They saw the brown lounge chair and ottoman Mary had recently picked out for Roy. While the Shotwells waited for word of their daughter's whereabouts, the phone rang repeatedly, and a voice would whisper, "It's Mary, help me." Police traced the calls to a young prankster and made sure they stopped. Detectives decided... Who the hell would do that? Jeez. Detectives decided that the movements of Little's car were a key to unlocking the mystery. Based on the odometer and her husband's mileage log, they estimated the comet had been driven 41 miles that couldn't be accounted for. There you go. They theorized that Little's abductor had taken her somewhere, assaulted her, and returned to Lennox. Well, that's the theory that we pretty much said it right at the beginning, right? There was just one problem with the theory, so now there's a problem. No one remembered seeing the comet in the parking lot overnight or before the start of business the next morning. Police interviewed scores of people who had been at Lennox in the off hours, including guards who patrolled the lot. Other cars had been noticed and even ticketed, but no one saw the comet. Investigators concluded, I just think it was probably put there at a, when there was people around, maybe even, just, mingling in with the rest of the cars. Investigators concluded it must have been driven back later that morning, a daring return in broad daylight. Another possibility received little credence. Margaret Ferguson, an Atlantan who had been shopping at Lennox the night Little disappeared, told her husband she had seen a silver comet leave the mall at around 8 with a woman fitting Little's description at the wheel. She was alone. Ferguson noticed the car she remembered when the Journal-Constitution I know, but what? That's definitely possible, though, right? That she drove away and then stopped maybe somewhere, or somebody waved her down or whatever, and she was abducted then. Not necessarily in the store parking lot. She just didn't make it home. Her husband reported the sighting to police. They never talked to Ferguson, even though her story called into question whether Little had been abducted elsewhere. There you go. Or been abducted at all. Number cruncher. The removal of Little's underwear implied rape. Detectives assembled a huge file on known sexual perverts and looked into numerous complaints of flashers at Lennox Square. At the time, in private, police trained their suspicions on a more sensitive target. Roy Little had no discernible motive to harm his wife. He stood to collect only a modest insurance settlement upon her death and had a solid alibi, having been out of town. But his spouse gets a hard look in disappearances, and this spouse rubbed cops the wrong way. He had to drag everything out of Roy. He didn't volunteer anything, says Ponder, who spent hours with the husband. Investigators learned that Mary's roommate had never liked Roy. They found him surly and quarreled with her over their engagement. Some of them refused to attend the wedding. Wow, really? Most police recall Little as merely cold and aloof. All agree he was strangely unperturbed by her bride's disappearance. When he was shown the bloody car, detectives say, he merely shrugged. Their skepticism was heightened when he insisted on getting back the comet. Now this makes him sound a little nutty now. Their only car as soon as possible and continued to drive it. No one was more hostile to Roy Little than W.K. Jack Perry, the lead Atlanta detective on the case. While he didn't necessarily believe the husband was responsible, he figured his perp was a stranger. He would have been delighted to hang something on Little. That boy wasn't right for some reason. Perry told Journal-Constitution reporters a few days before he died in 1995. Perry and Little skirmished whenever they met. According to Perry, The young man wouldn't mention his wife's disappearance unless the detective brought it up. He'd ask about other cases instead. Once Perry said Little taunted him about the possibility of a perfect crime. Relatives and close friends insisted Little was not cold, merely reserved. His mother told police he was privately devastated at losing Mary. People at the bank joked in his defense that you wouldn't expect an auditor to have a warm personality. But police still couldn't understand why he refused several invitations to take a lie detector test. Nothing ever implicated Roy Little, but suspicion was enough for his bosses in the state bank department. As they later admitted to detectives, they made his work life so unpleasant that he finally quit. In a moment of frankness with investigators, Little said he felt that some friends had cut him off. Within 3 years, he had obtained a Mexican divorce and remarried. Not sure what that means. He divorced again and remained in the Atlanta area through the late 90s. Now 63 and living in Florida, Little has consistently declined interview requests. Jeez. All of a sudden, that sort of threw me a curveball because I thought he was completely... They said he was absolutely cleared. Another line of inquiry focused on Mary Little herself. Some people told police she had been acting oddly in the days before disappearing. She had phoned an old friend expressing fear of something she couldn't explain. Sometimes she was afraid to go out at night. Witnesses at the office said she began receiving some upsetting calls. A job applicant at the bank overheard Little tell a caller, "Please leave me alone. I am a married woman now." She finally hung up. So maybe an ex, something like that. Let's see. Then there were the dozen roses Little received at her apartment that week. She hadn't mentioned them to her husband. No card was ever found, and the florist had no record or memory of the sender. Police wondered if a stalker was afoot, or whether she had heard from an earlier boyfriend or secret admirer. After all, she had been married. In her final days at the office, Little hinted to various co-workers that she had something important to tell them. She never said what it was. What could she have meant? One possibility emerged weeks into the investigation. When the FBI discovered a sex scandal at the bank, Little's boss, personal chief Gene Rackley, one possible emerged weeks into the investigation. When the FBI discovered a sex scandal at the bank, Little's boss, personal chief Gene Rackley, told agents she had been sent to the department to look into reports of prostitution on the premises and lesbian harassment of female employees. The situation had been deemed serious enough for the bank to bring in a former FBI agent to snoop around. The atmosphere around the office had been tense and several employees had felt their jobs were threatened. That she had something important to tell them. In her final days at the office, Little hinted to various co-workers that she had something important to tell them. She never said what it was. What could she have meant? Jeez. It's ridiculous. Well, this is the last page, but look at that. It's so long again. Gonna have to drink some water. What are you talking about, Cindy? Jesus. You're just like... cuckoo. You can't just sort of have a computer read print here, okay? Yeah, great. Good for you. Hey, Rackley retired and living on the Georgia coast downplays the scandal today. He said, let's see. He says it involved only a few low-level workers who blatantly misbehaved. Oh yeah, okay. Misbehaved, and that no one was punished for the private life. He insists Little did not know about the matter, even though she was his secretary. But according to the FBI files, she had told her mother and a friend in North Carolina about the scandal. Did she want to confide in some of her colleagues at the office as well? So now we bring in the office manager again. The sex inquiry was never... and guess what? The other person that worked in the same office dies. So, 1967. I think this is probably the closest angle you're going to get here. That there's something related to... yeah, like something to do with the office, right? Because it just feels like that's the key connection. You have the 67 woman who is, just a second, Shields, who worked in the same office, and she was found in the trunk of her vehicle. So did she too, maybe they both threatened something at work, like, hey, the harassment or some sort of a sexual nature. And then they were then forcibly sexually assaulted and then killed to keep them quiet. Something more like that. Doesn't that make a lot of sense? Almost like the stalker worked at the bank and had both made advances on both of these women at very different times, obviously, and then stalked them and tracked them down and killed both of them. Anyways, let's see. But according to the FBI files, she had told her mother and a friend in North Carolina about the scandal. Did she want to confide in some of her colleagues at the office as well? The sex inquiry was never disclosed publicly, but word of it was whispered around town. Nonetheless, the tongue-wagging led to an enduring rumor that Mary Little had run away with a woman, a laughable suggestion to her roommates who found themselves stared down when they dared to criticize her fiancé. The roommates, mostly C&S employees, were torn apart by fear after the disappearance. The police treated each as a potential suspect, and each silently wondered if one of the other was part of a deadly plot. One roommate recalled that DeKalb police, who entered the case because Little's residence was just across the county line, practically accused her of murder one night. They handed her a gun for protection the next day. She didn't know how to use it, and neither did the others. It's amazing that we didn't kill each other. We were so scared, one of the roommates says. The woman persuaded their landlord to let them out of their lease, and they moved from the Emory area to a duplex near Lenox Square. If they had known about the experience of a previous roommate of Little's, they might have moved farther away. A previous roommate of Little? Previous? The woman, an old friend, Charlotte, had been married for years and living in Georgia. She had been questioned briefly by police, but her name had not been made public. Not long after the disappearance, her husband answered the phone at home and heard an unknown male voice threaten, "Your wife is next." The couple left Georgia as fast as they could. Let's see. I'm not sure I get this part here. If they had known about the experience of a previous roommate of Little's, they might have moved farther away. The woman, an old friend from Charlotte, had been married for years and living in Georgia. She had been questioned briefly by police, but her name had not been made public. Not long after the disappearance, her husband answered the phone at home and heard an unknown male voice, "Your wife is next." I get it. So they're going to talk about Diane Shields over here. That's where I really want to get to that part. So, shortly before Thanksgiving, startling new evidence from Little's home state shifted the focus of the investigation. Her signature turned up on 2 gasoline credit card receipts from October 15th, the Friday she was reported missing. Such information would be instantly available today by computer, but it took weeks to process in 1965. The receipts suggested Little had bought a full tank of gas at an Esso station in Charlotte after midnight, October 14th, and another at Esso in Raleigh that afternoon. But I thought her parents lived there. So that's interesting. Was it somebody she had known as a kid that's a stalker? When police questioned the attendants, they recalled an unshaven middle-aged man at the wheel with a female passenger who seemed to be nursing a head wound. He had passed her the charge slips, and she had endorsed them. Mrs. Roy H. Little, Jr. Mary's parents recognized the handwriting as hers. Really? But how did the car... So she was transferred to another car, or what? I mean, I really don't get that. The attendants weren't able to describe the car precisely, but they did write down the license plate number. The tag had been stolen in Charlotte in mid-October. The new information was confusing. Someone had filched a tag in Little's hometown, put it on another car, driven to Atlanta, returned with Little to Charlotte, and then taken 12 hours to get to Raleigh, normally only 3 hours away. By using the victim's charge card, he almost seemed to be trying to lead police away from Atlanta. The sightings threw a wrench into theories about the case. If the kidnapper was in Raleigh on Friday afternoon, Little's Comet couldn't have been moving back in the Lenox. See, that's what I was just saying. Right? I was just saying that. Little's Comet couldn't have been moved back into the Lenox parking lot that morning. Unless another person was involved. See? That's exactly what I was just saying. Against all eyewitness accounts. Investigators decided the car must have been there through the night and gone unnoticed. Nor was there an easy explanation of Little's seemingly compliant behavior. Brent Turvey, a respected criminal profiler and author, suggests she could have been involved in a rough relationship and left Atlanta more or less willingly. A quarrel en route might have escalated unplanned violence. A quarrel with who, though? She's escaping somebody else, but this person's also violent? But that isn't the only possible interpretation of Little's failure to seek help at the gas stations. Barbara Rothbaum of the Emory Clinic, an expert in victim psychology, says it isn't unusual for kidnapped people to stay silent. So it's not unusual for kidnapped people to stay silent. Little could have simply been too afraid to speak up. By the time police discovered the charge card trail, it was cold. Still, the evidence gave hope to Little's family, believing she might still be alive. Her husband and mother made a televised plea to her presumed abductor, promising anything for her return. They got a prompt answer, an anonymous call demanding $20,000 in ransom. Ponder was monitoring the phone in Little's apartment when the extortionist called back. The husband was directed to go alone at midnight to an overpass in the Pisgah National Forest of western Northern Carolina, where he would find a piece of paper with further instructions posted on a sign. Ponder suspected the call was a hoax or work of an opportunist, but the FBI couldn't take a chance. An agent who vaguely resembled Roy Little was dispatched to the mountains. At the rendezvous, he found a piece of paper on the sign. It was blank. The caller was never heard from again. Weird. Eerie similarities. Here we go. Over the months, the leads dried up. On the first anniversary of Little's disappearance in 1966, police admitted they were no closer to finding her than they had been a year before. They'd even resorted to consulting a psychic. Then in the spring of 1967, the killing of another young woman brought the missing bride back into the news, if only because of eerie similarities. The 22-year-old victim had worked in Little's office in downtown Atlanta and had lived with some of her roommates. So it's a little not quite like they said she took her same position and lived with one of her, like the same roommate. So now it's a little like some of her other roommates. I mean, it's still very similar, right? Worked at the same place and everything. Diane Shields was a pretty blonde secretary from Gunterville, Alabama. Transferred into personnel after Little vanished. She occupied. She occupied Mary's old desk. There you go. So that is the same. Wow. Okay. Jesus. Okay. Now I'm like, holy crap. So let's do this again. Diane Shields was a pretty blonde secretary from Guntersville, Alabama. Transferred into personnel after Little vanished. She occupied Mary's old desk and befriended her former colleagues. For a time, she roomed with some of them in their Buckhead duplex. She eventually moved out to live with her sister in College Park and took a job as a receptionist with another company. So that's a little different because now she's not there anymore and doesn't live with those roommates. But was there somebody still there at the work that was interested in her? On May 19, 1967, Shields left work in her blue and white Chevy Impala. She never made it home. East Point police spotted the car at 2:30 a.m. near the drive-in window of a laundry on Sylvan Road. Blood was dripping from the rear end. Finding the keys in the ignition, they opened the trunk to discover Shields' body crammed upside down between a spare tire and a cardboard box. Among other things, the box contained a copy of Betty Crocker's New Dinner for Two. The receptionist had planned to marry in July. So again, somebody's about to get married. The other one got married just recently. Shields was fully clothed and had not been sexually assaulted, nor had she been robbed. Really. She was still wearing a diamond engagement ring, a scarf, and a piece of paper had been stuffed down her throat as if to silence her. Hearing about the killing the next day, Clint Chafin, superintendent... So how did she die then? She was still wearing... Hearing about the killing the next day, Clint Chafin, superintendent of the Atlanta detectives, told East Point police, "That sounds like our Mary Shotwell Little case." See, after saying that and then finding all these connections, man, that's crazy. His hunch intensified when it came out that Shields had received roses at the bank. Jeez. And pretended they were anonymous. Just like Little, they weren't. They came from a babysitting client. The news touched off several days of jittering speculation that a rose killer was loose in Atlanta. The parallels were enough to scare some of the women who had roomed with Shields and Little. On the weekend after the murder, two of them phoned Ponder in terror and asked if they could come to the agent's house. My wife and I sat up with them in the living room. See, that's where her body was, right? There's the box and the tire. He remembers they were scared to death they were specifically leery of one of their co-workers, although they couldn't tell Ponder why she would want to harm them. As it turned out, she was as frightened as they were. Ponder thought the similarities in the Little and Shields cases were mere coincidence. On his recommendation, the FBI stayed out of the second investigation. That's stupid. Most of the police who worked the homicide disagreed. Yeah, who wouldn't? That's so stupid. With his assessment. To this day, Melvin Banks, East Point chief detective on the case, believed that someone implicated in the internal investigation at C&S, there you go, see? That's what I was just saying a little bit ago, was responsible for Shields' death. They're connected, no question, he says. I totally agree. I think that's it. I think that there was somebody there, and this lady Shields probably left there and took information with her. Most of the police who worked the homicide disagreed with the assessment. Okay, yeah, we just read that part. They're connected, no question. But East Point was never able to make an arrest. As with Little's, the case file is nowhere to be found, really. They're missing too, huh? Interesting. There was one other potential connection between Shields and Little that was never reported. Shield told her closest friend back home in Gunnersville that she was working undercover with police trying to solve the disappearance of a woman named Mary. Oh, God. Really? They want me to work with them so we can close this case, Gail's husband recalls her saying. Really? God, this one's crazy. No wonder there's podcasts on this shit. Others recall that Shields was uncharacteristically secretive in the months before she died, not showing up for appointments and vanishing for hours without explanation. None of the surviving detectives knows of any involvement by Shields in the Little investigation. Perhaps Jack Perry, Atlanta lead on the case, gave her his card and asked her to keep her eyes open since she was working in Little's office and living with Little's that sounds reasonable. And living with Little's intimates. Perhaps he asked her to do more. He never said. Far from solving the Little mystery, the Shields slang actually confused matters for another Atlanta detective who was working the case. When C.J. Strickland was quoted in the newspaper as saying the crime seemed related, he'd received a phone call from Little's mother. She told me she didn't want the investigation into her daughter's disappearance pursued any further, says Strickland, now in his 80s and living near Jackson. That's odd as hell. Yeah, that struck him as odd. Little had been missing less than 2 years. The detective wondered if the family had heard from her and suggested that the FBI tap their phone. The Bureau declined. Strickland wasn't the only cop who suspected the victim, John Cameron, another homicide detective involved in the case, had always wondered if Mary Little pulled a fast one. I've thought about this many, many times over the years, says Cameron, now 66 and retired in McDonough. Based on my experience in these cases, I simply don't believe she's dead. Can I explain why she did it? No. But there must be an explanation. Thanks, Georgina Stoliker. Boy, it's been a brutal one tonight, but thank you very much. Every few years, an informant comes forward and the ashes are stirred. In the late 60s, authorities almost tore up a runway at the Atlanta airport when a prisoner claimed Little was buried there. In the 80s, the Fulton County District Attorney's Office conducted 2 digs based on a tip from a woman who said she had watched Little's murder as a child and suppressed the memory. The most notorious episode occurred 10 years ago when police, acting on information from a woman who said she had witnessed Little's killing, ripped up the floor of an auto repair garage in Forsyth County. Ponder, who had long since retired, knew they wouldn't find anything. When he heard a TV reporter say that the woman recalled the victim's red dress, he phoned the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. I talked to Mary's mother, he said. She didn't have a red dress. Ponder is sitting in the den of his home near North Lake Mall. The walls are hung with plaques and framed testimonial from his long career as a G-man. The table is cluttered with vials of pills and medical references that attest to the diabetes and heart ailments that are overtaking his retirement. His face, once as sharp as a hawk, has softened, but his eyes glint with life as he reaches towards the coffee table and picks up the brown folder he couldn't leave at the office. On the Sunday after Little disappeared, Ponder was helping interview her roommates at Atlanta Police Headquarters when a woman named Carolyn Smitherman came in to report an incident. She said she had been walking to her car at Lenox shortly before Little would have left the mall when she realized she was being followed. She jumped into her vehicle and locked the door as the pursuer, a thin man with a brown crew cut, grabbed the handle. "If you think you're going to get in my car, you're crazy," she told him. He tapped the window and said, "Your back tire is low." Ponder closes the file. "I think that was probably the man who grabbed Mary," he says. "I think he drove her somewhere, raped her, and then brought her back to Lenox and switched cars. Then he drove her to North Carolina." But that would take that right there is more of a serial killer, because that wouldn't be the guy that worked at the office, because why would he be attacking a random person when the other two are connected, right? You get what I'm saying? So that would just be a some random serial killer type. Ponder closes the file. "I think that was probably the man who grabbed Mary," he says. "I think he drove her somewhere, raped her." See, I think that sounds like what happened. "And then brought her back to Lenox and switched cars." I mean, that sounds like what happened to her, but I'm thinking that it could actually be the person from work and not the person who followed that lady to her car. I don't know. If it's the guy that followed the lady to the car, then it's probably not somebody that worked at the office. There's many cases of women abducted at malls, so it's hard to... But this isn't. Both of these aren't at malls, though. One of them was something else. "I imagine she's buried in the woods somewhere north of Raleigh." So he thinks that was her in the car at the gas station. Ponder closed the file. "I think that was probably the man who grabbed Mary," he says. "I think he drove her somewhere, raped her, and then dropped her back to Lenox and switched cars. Then he drove her to North Carolina. I imagine she's buried in the woods somewhere north of Raleigh." Ponder has said as much to Little's family. He has stayed in touch with them over the years, attending the wedding of Mary's little sister in Charlotte, exchanging Christmas cards, extending sympathy when her father died of a heart attack in 1979. He still hears from Mary's mother, Margaret Shotwell, despite what she told police. Ponder says she never stopped following the investigation. Now in her late 80s and in failing health, she declines to discuss her missing daughter. "She calls from time to time," Ponder says. "She gets pretty upset. She's never gotten over it." A few years ago, in a handwritten letter addressed "Dearest Jim," Miss Shotwell sent Ponder some newspaper clippings about a man who had abducted and killed a jogger in Charlotte. His record and background made her wonder whether he was the one who took her Mary. It had been so long she didn't know whom to contact with the Bureau anymore. You are the FBI to me, she wrote. Ponder dutifully relayed the information. Like all the other leads, it went nowhere. Well, there you go. That story was pretty cool. I mean, it was interesting. A lot of stuff on that one. There's like 10 different. The work thing seems too. The odds of somebody else at the same office, sitting in the same seat, who living with the same roommates, dying 2 years later in a sort of a similar, seemingly similar fashion, is too coincidental to me. So, yes, there was that other person in the parking lot, which makes you go, wow, and that guy thinks that he's the one, and if that's the case, then it's a random person because he was going to abduct that woman who isn't one of those two. So, anyways, thank you guys for being here tonight. Not going to be able to give out a notebook again, but that's even in combination with last night. But appreciate you guys all being here, and yeah, hopefully tomorrow night will be better. Because tomorrow night's donation night, right? It's the last push of the month, and then I start sending money out to various charities. My goal is to be able. We've already done 1,500 this month, and hopefully we get up to 4,500, maybe 5,000 total. Okay. So hope tomorrow's better than some of these nights have been going here. It usually is, so we'll see. All right, everybody, thank you for being here tonight. And hold on a second. Thank you to Scoutin' Dude, Jim Lawn, Melissa South, Caligal 3 with a cat eye, Brown Eyed Girl, Tina Susser, Travelin' Teresa, Billy Juliana, Jim Lawn, Scoutin' Dude, Brown Eyed Girl, Jim Lawn, Lisa Valenzuela, Cindy J, Brown Eyed Girl with a cat eye. I mean, without those two cat eyes, boy, that would have been. WNC Granny, Daphne, Andrew Spencer, and Tony Egenoir. Alright. So thank you guys. Man, that was pretty crazy, right? And thank you everybody that was supporting the channel tonight. Hit that like button on the way out the door. I know that's difficult for a lot of you. It's pretty tough to just hit that little button, but that's not hard at all, really. In reality, you just take your thumb and press it. So thank you for being here. We'll see you tomorrow. And as I always say, everybody, until next time, be safe out there. Oh, and I was still here. I'm sitting in the dark.
Yeah, I've been doing this true crime thing for quite a while now. And during this whole time, I have not seen one person that is a crime dissector, thug rejector. I'm a certified human lie detector. Gonna get ya on a stretcher if you try and play me like an old projector. Crime sector is my nectar. Professor Gray is gonna give another lecture. Crime collector, freak connector, and I'm always gonna be a pup protector. Fool deflector, interceptor, and I'm meaner than a specter with a vector on his pector. With all respect, y'all, just remember I've a temple fucking check ya. I have no agenda, I'm no pretender, and I'll serve it to you straight without the blender. And in the end, I'm gonna send ya on a mission to reveal the true offender. Yeah, so I'll just get right back to work. All right, everybody? Talk to you.
Good night, everybody. Yay.
No, I don't have my